Good morning, everyone. I'll call to order this February 28th, 2022 meeting of the Electoral Area Services Committee. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded and traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, keepers of this land. On the agenda today, we have a delegation from Macaulay Road and Area Neighborhood Association for receipt.
Second.
Thank you. We have Suzanne Sawyer here in the room and Catherine Davidson online on Zoom. So I will pass it over to, is it Suzanne? Are you going first? Yeah. Okay, great. So just press the button when you're ready.
Good morning.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, okay. That's good. Good morning. We, the directors of the Macaulay Road Area and Neighborhood Association, are here to speak in support of funding the motions of September the 20th and November the 8th of 2021 concerning access on Macaulay Road. We also are pleased to have the opportunity to give you some Marana updates. And we do appreciate the mention of our association in the recent Area C newsletter. Thank you, Director Greaves. I am sure we do not need to remind you of the unique situation in which over 1,000+ people find themselves who live in the Macaulay Road service area. With that in mind, we would like to see adequate funding for the initiatives, and we would like to have active participation on their relevant committees. In the future, we hope you will view us as a resource, a support, and a contact when issues concerning our area are brought to the board. Now, I will turn your attention to Catherine Davidson, one of our directors.
Thank you. Go ahead, Catherine.
Well, good morning, directors and staff. I think I'm sharing my screen now. Can you see the?
Yep, we can see it. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. So the CVRD asked for public input to the budgeting process, and this is what we're doing. I saw later in the agenda that you had an online a series of questions from me, and hopefully this presentation can address some of them. So background, Marana was incorporated in July of 2021 with the purpose to support improvements to the Macaulay Road and area neighborhood. Being Macaulay Road is over 17 kilometers long with 5 subdivisions off it, and narrow old logging road and lots of traffic. So we're focusing on emergency access and egress, alternate permanent road access, and road safety. For activities, we held an information booth at the Black Creek Fair in September. We had a community meeting at the Oyster River Fire Hall, and that focused on evacuation routes. Howie came and did a presentation, and Fire Chief Bruce Green also did a Fire Smart presentation that was well received. And we presented at the ESC September meeting. We've consulted with members and did it on road safety issues and their suggested improvements. And we had a site visit with MOTI staff, and that's Ashley Cousins, our North Island area manager, came out and spent quite a bit of time with us, going up and down the road and looking at various areas. We've met with other community associations for support and information, notably the Livable Rural Road Saanich group. That's an advocacy group for 5 rural roads in Saanich, and they have similar issues. Long, narrow roads, big ditches on each side, and lots of traffic. We've had communications to members through newsletters, website, and Facebook, and we've been very fortunate to have a director who has a web design background, so it's been very good to have her on board. Planned activities for 2022, we have a spring event, Get to Know Marana Neighbors, and Walk the Mac, which will be an organized walk of Macaulay Road, and that will focus on road safety awareness. And we've requested to participate in the CVRD 2022 Strategic Planning Priority of Neighborhood Emergency Planning. We don't know what that looks like yet. It could be programming, or we'll find out, hopefully. And we requested to act as a resource for the 2022 Macaulay Road Feasibility Study on Emergency Access and Rights of Way. And we've requested participation in CVRD Moti and Marana Planning Committee for alternate permanent road access from the resulting from the November 8th CVRD staff report. So the two Electoral Service Committee motions that we received, the first one relates to the feasibility study on emergency access and egress, and the second one is regarding the planning committee for identifying future alternative public access for Macaulay Road. And this is the exact wording that we've taken from the minutes of those meetings. Thank you for that. And our relevance to CVRD budget issues. So the concern is the motion of September 20th wasn't carried forward in the ESC management reports, and it's referred to the November 8th motion. But we see that as two separate activities that could be reported on as such, separate funding allocations. And sources for these funding allegations were identified as staff time to oversee a contracted report and funding for the feasibility studies through the director's discretionary funding allocation. So we're questioning the scope of the report. Would the criteria determine the funding allocation to the contracting process, or is the available funding allocation, the discretionary fund, does that determine the scope and criteria of the report to be developed? So that's out there. And we've requested to review the terms of reference for the planning committee, and we haven't had the opportunity to as yet. So other community area funding issues, we canvassed our members on road safety issues, and they identified speeding, no shoulders, the need for multi-use footpath. And they suggested that, sections of the road could be developed over time for, multi-use path. One route being from Martin Park Drive, and that would allow Robinson Lake residents to get to Bear Creek Park. And the other one, there was a specific request from Laurie Road residents to get a footpath or trail from the intersection of Laurie Road to Bear Creek Park, and that's about 1 kilometer. The One Spot North Trail System, it presently dead ends off of Macaulay Road, and we're requesting that the CVRD provide additional focus resources to develop and join this trail network. We know it's in the plan, but we're hoping that there can be some work on that in the next few years. And we've looked at undeveloped and unmaintained parks. We request a review of the area parklets. There's several in our area, and also the Oyster, Pearl of the Oyster parkland dedication. It perhaps could be looked at for future use and development. That's parkland along the Oyster River. And the Saratoga Speedway, Macaulay Road frontage, it requires landscaping and could support a multi-use path. So here's a picture of the Laurie Road, Macaulay Road intersection, deep ditch on one side, a bit of a shoulder on the other around the mailboxes, and it's about 1 kilometer the other way to Bear Creek Park. And this is the Macaulay Road and Saratoga Speedway road frontage. This berm was developed about a year ago. I believe the parking lot is intended to be on the other side, but you can see there's quite a bit of room here that a multi-use path could be developed. We have had some of our members express concerns about the Speedway development, and we've directed them to the Saratoga Speedway Concerned Citizens Group. So our request that the two ESC motions relevant to our association be viewed as separate activities and managed and reported on that way. One being the feasibility study on emergency access. We see that as an immediate future activity, and also the second one being the planning committee. We see that as long-term planning. And we request that we can review and comment on the criteria for the feasibility report on emergency access, and also on the terms of reference for the planning committee. And we request that CVRD staff time is adequately funded to support these initiatives. And we request that the Macaulay Road area community identified improvements. This is the request for multi-use footpaths. I can't see my notes here, are included in the, oh yeah, the parks development, multi-use footpaths parks development are included in the CVRD parks and active transportation planning and funding allocations for 2022 to 2026. So that concludes our presentation. And are there any comments that you'd like to make or questions?
I'll ask the directors if they have comments before I turn it over to staff for a response. Director Grieve?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, you touched on a whole laundry list there of things that would be great to have, obviously, but you know, as you probably are aware, that the feasibility study money comes only from Area C. And as it is, it's a $77,000 budget, out of which we're looking to spend about a third of it on this issue. So that I think that that's, you know, has to be kept in mind. There's other jurisdictions with other needs as well. Not to say that, you know, it won't make headway, but the issue around pass on MOTI road right-of-ways has been a long-standing one. We've been fighting that battle now for the 15 years I've been around and elected as an elected official. And I think we did bring that forward to, we had a delegation here from both MOTI and their contractor last month. And we asked that question, you know, who should we be lobbying here? You know, should we be going a little higher up the food chain and working on the ministry on a top down? Or should we be working, you know, as we are with the local offices who are more familiar, of course, with the issues in the Comox Valley? And basically we were told both. So it always helps, though, if you have a minister who's live to this. And I'm sure we're not the only regional district in BC that has been working on trying to get the Ministry of Transport to move away from the Ministry of Cars and into active transportation and everything else. So I don't know if staff has any awareness. I didn't see anything in the last BC budget last week that signals a change. In fact, it looks like they're going to be building more car culture infrastructure in the Lower Mainland, where of course, you know, it's you know, under the Fraser River or over the Fraser River, whatever. So I think a lot of the dollars are going there. But you know, I would turn it over to staff to address some of those things. I know I think we're looking at April with the starting the working on a term of reference with MOTI. But as I say, I mean, it's a matter of balance. We have only so many dollars, and when it comes to things like parks, as you're talking about, again, this seems to be lost on the general public in the Comox Valley as well. That all the parks in the rural areas that are used in some part by the municipality and members of the towns and cities are paid for exclusively out of the budget from the electoral areas. So I don't know if the staff want to comment on where we are on the timeline of this consultation. That would be great. Thanks.
Thanks, and through the chair to the directors. I wanted to touch on a couple of things and then can respond to Director Grieve's question. So the one question that was raised was around the two resolutions coming out of the EASC and how the one from September has been dropped was the reference. The way that the EASC operates is those motions do get put forward, they get approved at an Electoral Area Services Committee meeting, and then staff will respond to them in due course. And what happened with the September motion is that a report came forward to the November EASC, and then the committee resolved action on that report, which results in the November EASC. And so moving forward, staff are working with that November resolution, and I don't have the wording in front of me, but would be looking to the terms of reference with MODI and with access and egress matters, both emergency and more in general with road safety going forward. We do have a feasibility service budget on today's agenda as well, and there will be a presentation where I think it's briefly touched on the work of the study work that's been raised to the delegation here. So I'm not sure if Doug or Howie wanted to speak at this time. Just a really quick update on what that study work falling under the feasibility service would be. But we are talking about that later in the agenda under the budgets.
Go ahead, Howie.
Thanks, Howie.
Great, thank you. Through the chair, to the presenters. Yeah, so in the terms of reference, which we've just got a confirmation back from Ministry of Transport, that they have requested that the road safety reference in that terms of reference be removed. They want to work with the Marana separately on that concern. But with the terms of reference, basically, we will be moving forward into the spring to start an RFP, a registration for or request for proposal. And in that, part of that will be getting a contractor to look at the engagement opportunities with the community, 2 of them, as well as mapping support from our departments to be able to provide an overview of what roads, what might exist. As we spoke before, the emergency planning department has already done some pre-work and do have some alternate routes. This will be an opportunity to look at those a little more detail and also look at opportunities to identify if there's other ones that might be out there. It has identified in the terms of reference that this will really need to go back to the Ministry of Transport, who do have the rights and responsibilities for any roads or any kind of implication of infrastructure.
Great. Thank you. Howie, while we have you, the presentation touched on a request of working with neighborhood emergency planning in the Macaulay Road area. Can you speak to that at all? Is there anything in the work plan for this year?
Yeah, to the chair. Yeah, the terms of reference actually identify Marana as a component to be an advisory to the group, as well as we will be working with a neighborhood emergency program concept in that area. And hopefully we'll be able to develop a long-standing relationship of addressing any kind of emergency preparedness that might develop in the Macaulay area.
Great, thanks. I see a question from Director Arbor.
We don't have the flashing lights today.
No,
Something's
yeah.
happening. But thank you, and thanks for the presentation. And still very supportive of the work around emergency access and solving that issue. On the other one, which has to do more with the multi-use path, I guess I'm in a way going to be Mr. kind of cold shower today. But that's through the sharing of information, because I hate it when we half encourage something and then you run into a bit of what I consider a fairly significant obstacle. And the obstacle is the following: is this fall we completed a massive active transportation network strategy for the Comox Valley, and we identified, and that there was public engagement, all the rest of this, and there was 25 priorities across area A, B, and C that were highlighted. And just in context, when we write those strategies, it's a bit like when we read the park strategy, or like those strategy documents end up guiding a lot of our decision and of our work. And unfortunately, this project is not identified as part of the 25. When you talk about Macaulay Road and the multi-use path, it's simply not in there. It is identified as a long-term potential. So at least there's a space for it. But then we go back to the 25 priorities. None of them are funded. So as we look to do some of those projects, and I'll give you 2 examples in your area that were identified. And so one is Paulson Road, 600 meters on Paulson Road, multi-use roadside shoulder connection to Miracle Beach Elementary from Miracle Beach Drive. Could include crossing improvements depending on location. So because it's near the school and all those things. costed at $1.3 million. We don't have the funds for it. The second is Miracle Beach Drive itself, multi-use roadside connection from Highway 19A to Miracle Beach Provincial Park. Will provide connection to Polson Road. So I'd encourage the group to review that strategy. I have had in the past 4 years ago. So I'm not trying to dissuade success. I'm just trying to talk about the obstacles you might run into actually us moving action on it. So a few years ago, I had that problem on the transit side where Hornby and Denman were not identified as short-term priorities, but they weren't identified in the long-term priority. That took a lot of work to bring the board around to say, okay, you know what, here's the reasons why we should look at something that's maybe set for the long term, but maybe we want to look at reprioritizing. But this will have to be balanced with a plan that has many priorities that are not funded. So I'm just saying it's a hard road. I think we're likely to be more likely to advance the emergency one because we've really prioritized that one with Macaulay. So I don't know if colleagues or staff have comments, but if you haven't looked at the active transportation network, I definitely would look there because for the board as a whole, not only the areas, but the board as a whole, this will be the starting point, I think, for discussions as to whether we would support, say that we did grant applications or things like that for Macaulay Road, then we would have to legitimize that as to why we would pursue that rather than the 25 priorities that we did identify and ratify in our plan. Thanks.
Sorry, Director Grieve. And just to the delegation, we don't normally allow questions from the delegation. Usually you present and then the directors ask questions. And so that's how the interaction happens, just so you know. So Director Grieve has a question.
Yes, yeah, I guess when you take a step back and you look at the big picture of Area C, emergency preparedness is a really big piece of it because we have a couple of outstanding pinch points where there is dead ends and no possibility of egress in case of wildfire, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the big one is Macaulay Road, but also is Plateau Road. And as you know, the Railway Avenue community down there as well. So we're working on all of these, but I'm just wondering if Mr. DiMarzo has any information regarding progress on the one spot trail, because I know we've got a bit of an issue there where the ministry actually sold the right of way to a property owner. And I'm just, I know that long term, we're trying to get those rights of way back for the one spot trail. So we're working in that direction, but I'm just wondering if Doug has any comment on
Sure.
how we're doing on, pardon me, on the one spot extension in the Macaulay Road area. Any news?
Through the chair to Director Grieve, thanks for the opportunity to speak about the one spot trail. I'll just briefly say that the one spot trail continues to have 4 major gaps in its system, and we are working towards closing all those. The gap from Macaulay Road area to the Ham Road intersection, one of the gaps that was previously referred to as sold to a private property owner, has been top of mind for us for a number of years, and we continue to work with the change in property ownership as well as new owners to try and close that gap. So we're hopeful that something will come to fruition in the next years, but it'll definitely be a focus of all the active transportation priorities that they put forward here. I would say that one would become a focus through our meeting with the group in April and starting that plan and maybe getting some community support behind understanding how that gap could influence the Macaulay Road neighborhood, both from an emergency perspective, but also the one spot trail.
Dr. Grieve, do you have a follow-up?
Just quickly, so there has been discussion with the owner of the property then?
In recent years, yes, there has been discussion.
So we maybe double up on that a little bit.
Yeah.
Make it very plain that we're we're in the market. And of course, again, with our meager budget for parks and spread as thin as it is from one end of the regional district to the other. My question is it possible to use formerly the gas tax dollars for these kind of situations? Because we're not building something on MOTI property. And that's a big issue. We cannot get money to build on somebody else's property. So something like a park acquisition, or in this case, a right-of-way acquisition, would that be, would the community funds be applicable to that?
I think it's safe to say if we were able to acquire the property, we would come to the ASC with a financial plan to improve that property to make it possible to create that connection to Ham Road through either reserves, community works funds, or something. Otherwise, I can't recall. There's some exceptions on community works funds, some legalese that we can work with. But either way, I think if we're able to acquire it, it'll be shortly thereafter we come with a capital plan to improve it for that connection.
But once again, the cost would be distributed throughout all 3 electoral areas.
Yeah, it'd be a parks. It's already a parks priority, and it'd carry on as such.
And then it enters a perception of fairness issue, and everybody has to get their piece. So, but good to know that we're still active on that, because I've been, well, again, for the last 15 years, I've been very adamant on the one spot about securing that right away, and I know we made huge gains. So it's obviously it's top of mind. And I would just like, to thank the association for bringing this all forward, keeping it top of mind here at this committee level. And I'm looking forward to whatever report we get out with our with the contract we're going to engage for this MOU.
Thank you. Before we end, Howie, any other emergency planning reports, or are we good?
Yeah, from my side of the project, yeah.
Thank you. Well, then I'll call the question on receipt. All in favor of receipt? Any opposed? And that's carried. And I'd like to thank Suzanne and Catherine for coming, and thank you for presenting today. Next up, we have the management report of February 2022 for receipt, moved and seconded. And are there any comments on the report? Seeing none, all those in favor of receipt? Opposed? And that's carried. And we have a placeholder for public input on our 2022-2026 financial plan. Do we have any comments from the public?
Madam Chair, we do have Kevin Duville. I'm not sure if you wanted to provide any update here on the financial plan process overall. And I think Jake Martins was going to then follow that up with just a brief comment on this correspondence on the agenda. Kevin?
Thank you, through the chair, to the directors. Good morning. So yes, I can provide a real quick update on where we're at with the financial planning process, and then certainly turn it over to Jake Martins, who can speak to the public input that has been received with respect to budgets that are being presented today. So as the directors, I believe, are aware, we're getting into the home stretch with respect to our 22-26 financial planning process. This is the 4th of 5 scheduled meetings for the Electoral Area Services Committee, where we'll be presenting budgets going forward. Today, we have 11 staff reports being presented to you, covering 39 distinct budgets within the regional district. And then we do have one more scheduled meeting taking place on March the 7th, where the last 3 budgets with respect to the electoral areas will be coming forward for your information and deliberation. So I'll leave that at that. Certainly have the dashboard available if directors would like to see it, but at this point, Jake can speak to the public information that's been received.
Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, so as the directors are aware, on the agenda is the correspondence dated February 8th from the Macaulay Road and Neighborhood Association. This correspondence does basically follow the delegation which they just presented, so I certainly won't read it verbatim, but nonetheless, the correspondence is seeking funding support from the directions of the ESC with regards to emergency access and egress and other interests of the group. This correspondence does relate to function 153, which is the area C feasibility studies, which has been noted. And so this matter is will be considered under that budget when it comes forward later in the meeting. Unless there's any further questions, the committee may consider a motion to receive the correspondence.
Thank you. Anyone have any other comments or questions? So do we move on receipt of the public of Kevin's first, and then a separate motion for the correspondence? All right. So on receipt of the staff report, then all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. And can I get a motion to receive the correspondence from the Macaulay Road Area Neighborhood Association? Moved. And I can second. Any comments on that? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor of receipt? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. Moving on to reports, we have the Advisory Planning Commission minutes from Area A and Area C. Would someone like to move both, or moved? Seconded, Director Grieve. Any comments on those minutes? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. And going on, moving on again to the 2022-26 proposed financial plan budget presentations. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thanks. I think, Kevin, you probably preempted yourself. So I'm not sure if you had more to say at this point, or simply receipt of the intro, and then we'll move into the grant and aid. Secondly,
I have a question.
Oh, we do have a question. Great, Director Arbor.
Yeah, this year it looks like a lot of these items of the budget presentation, they don't have the receipt function on our agenda. So, and I, like the public input or the budget, it's just, we ended up receiving it, but it's not on the agenda. Is there a reason why we did it like that we're not putting them up for receipt? Because we keep receiving them anyways, even though it's not on the agenda.
I think it's when we have attachments and when we have reports, then we do include motions for receipt. I think the statement, like under number 2 here, Kevin, to provide an update on the financial plan. It is simply that, and it's a verbal introduction. It doesn't require necessarily a receipt motion, but it doesn't hurt to have a receipt motion as well.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah, no, I would just say because we're doing it, and I saw that at other board and commission as well. A report's a report, whether verbal or written. So I think I would just add the item for receipt, and that way it's clear. Because I think we've had that culture of receiving things.
Thanks for that, Director Free.
I would concur totally that, any information is information, and let's err on the side of caution and receive them all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments, and it sounds like staff have noted. And any other questions? No. So then on receipt, anyone, all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. So moving on, we have the grant and aid services functions 120 to 124 for receipt.
Move 3.
Moved and seconded, and pass it over to staff.
Thanks. And this one is over to Kevin Duville, Manager of Financial Planning. Kevin.
Thank you very much once again through the chair to the directors. Good morning. So I'm just bringing up my screen here, and hopefully you see a short presentation on the grant and aid services functions 120, 124 for this year's financial plan. So as the slide indicates, these services have all been established as per section 263(1)(c) of the Local Government Act, and the purpose of that piece of legislation is for providing assistance for the purposes of benefiting the community or any aspect of the community, of which of course these services do. The 3 primary grant and aid services were established back in 1985, with the grant and aid services for Hornby and Denman subsequently separately established back in 2009 at the time of the split of the now former Comox Strathcona Regional District. The CVRD provides rural community grants annually to numerous nonprofits and charitable organizations, and those organizations have a variety of different mandates, programs, or initiatives that they all undertake throughout the Comox Valley. Staff undertook a pretty significant review of all CVRD granting services and programs back in 2020, and that was all brought forward to the not only the Electoral Area Services Committee, but a number of other committees and to the board, at which time we did some improvements to the application process, the processes overall, and those were implemented for the first time in 2021. And I've just provided a link there to the webpage on our website that speaks to all of our community granting programs and how folks can learn more about those programs and how they can apply. So speaking to some work plan highlights from 2021, in 2021, a total of 38 community organizations received 41 approved rural community grants, and those totaled $203,050. Overall, we received 48 applications for a total combined requests of just over $317,000 for financial support that year. Overall funding available for distribution in 2021 was $242,899. So at the end of the day, we ended up dispersing 84% of the total funding that was available for disbursement last year, with the balance being carried forward into 2022. And as I've indicated there, for 2022, we currently have just under $280,000 in grant funding available and budgeted to support any applications that are received this year. So this slide just provides a bit of a quick breakdown of the grant need or rural community grant funding by service. And what I've provided here is an example of the grant funding available in 2022 versus what was available in our 2021-25 adopted budget. As you can see there in 2021, and as I spoke to on the previous slide, we had $242,899 available in 2021. That is up a little bit this year, again, with some of the budgets and the carry forwards as I've indicated, which leaves total available in 22 of just under $280,000. So to provide you a bit of a sense of the 2022 tax impacts and the comparisons to the previous year, you can see that the requisitions are essentially the same as they were in 2021. So a total of $243,405 across all 5 grant and aid service areas. We've provided there the estimated residential tax rates from there. And I guess the big takeaway from that is, given the significant increase in the assessments that we've seen certainly across the valley this year, even though the requisitions have stayed essentially the same, you'll notice that the residential rate per 1,000 has actually reduced. But of course, that's really dependent then on what an individual household would be worth, and then they can calculate what that overall tax impact on them would be. So as far as anticipated next steps, of course, like a lot of our financial plans going forward, any requested changes stemming from today's meeting can and will be reflected in the 22-26 recommended financial plan that we will be starting to put together shortly. And of course, that gets rolled up into our annual budget bylaw, and we will be bringing that forward to the CVRD board for its consideration, firstly on March 29th, and then secondarily on March 31st. Right on that statutory deadline of March 31st. The community grant application deadline is set as actually today, February the 28th. And once all of those submissions are compiled and collected, we will be distributing those to the electoral area directors for their review and consideration via the director's intranet page. And then as part of our enhanced rural community grant process, all funding allocations will be determined at a future meeting of this committee, with distribution to all approved recipients to be done by no later than August the 15th. And that's all I have for this presentation, but certainly more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kevin. Director Greve.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair, through the CAO to Kevin. It might be useful, actually, Kevin, just to explain what the criteria is for community groups to apply for the community aid program, or what it was called now, grant and aid, so-called grant and aid service. So I guess it is a grant and aid with a new name. What organizations are eligible? So for instance, do they have to be in the electoral areas, etc.?
Through the chair to Director Greve. So yes, in summary, organizations do have to be either a nonprofit or a charitable organization to be able to apply for a rural community grant. No, they don't necessarily have to be within an electoral area, but certainly any of the services that they are providing do need to be demonstrated that they are benefiting residents within an electoral area, because of course the municipalities don't contribute to these services. These are fully funded by the electoral areas. And so, yes, we do obviously also ask that any organization putting an application forward does look at kind of the board strategic drivers. And obviously we would like to make sure that any of the organizations or initiatives that we are funding, do go to support those board strategic drivers.
Go ahead.
Of course, thanks so much for that. And so you did mention there that once again, the municipalities do not contribute a red cent towards this funding program.
Through the chair to Director Grieve, that is correct. The municipalities do have their own various iterations of granting that they provide to their residents, and so it's really up to each of those entities to determine, how they and where they would like to support organizations within their boundaries.
Yeah, I think it's very important to reiterate the fact that they do have their own grant and aid, but not to this extent. The only one more thing I want to ask is about stacking. Is it exclusive that if you get a grant and aid, you cannot be getting funds from any other service in the electoral areas?
Again, through the chair to Director Grieve. So what we always do as staff is once we receive an application, we do take a look at the request being made and the specific activity or initiatives that are being requested. And if there is a more applicable regional district service in place that would be better accommodating that request, we would certainly be looking to shift that there. Otherwise, the Rural Community Grant or Grant and Aid program is available to cover off any of those other activities that may not qualify for a separate service, because no, we don't like to often be funding the same agency through multiple service areas.
Yeah, I wanted to draw that out of you because it's never happened, I don't think. So you can't double dip. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Director Arbor, you have a question?
Yeah, I think on this discussion, which I'm sure has been occurring every year for the last 40 years, or since the Grant and Aid program was established. First one is maybe we want to, if the name is going to stick, maybe we want to change the bylaw to call it the Rural Community Grant rather than the Grant and Aid function. Otherwise, I think we will get stuck with Grant and Aid language for a long time. And the second is if Dr. Grieve is really serious about his concern about rural areas funding things in the municipalities, it is at the discretion of the ESC that we could have a policy that you could propose a motion that only rural organizations or activities in rural areas are considered for this. This would be a big departure from the existing policy because I think we have used those funds to support and partner with municipalities, but a bit like your park discussion, we don't see mechanisms from the municipalities contribute to us. And if you wanted to be strict about it and say those monies are just going to be used in rural areas, that is definitely within our purview to consider a change like that.
Thanks for that comment, Director Arbor. I can't say that I would support something like that personally. I think our community really benefits from the community, the rural grant function, regardless of where the organizations are. And I'd hate to see that sort of restriction put place on organizations applying for funding. But, we can have that discussion if that motion ever comes forward. Kevin, I know you and I've discussed this with staff that I had wanted to raise the requisition for the Area B function 121 in the order of about $10,000. I believe currently the requisition's at $55,980, and I was wanting to raise it to $65,980. I note there's quite a lot of room in the maximum levy. We're not even for Area B, we're not even at 2 cents yet per thousand. So I'm hoping, that doesn't make a huge dent, but I think we would still have room. Kevin, would you be able to comment on like what a difference that might make, or you can just say we have room if that's.
Certainly through the chair, I guess to the chair. Yes, I mean, maximum levies, I believe in most of these service areas aren't necessarily the issue. I mean, they have some substantial room. I will note, and I believe I have noted with you, Chair, that currently for 2022, you do have about 71,413 in available funding, but certainly your prerogative if you would like to increase that. Maybe just to give some additional context. So back in 2020, of course, when the COVID-19 pandemic was first hitting, the directors did do some one-time increases to their requisitions to help support particularly those organizations that were meeting the needs of supporting activities as a result of the pandemic, and certainly helping to support vulnerable populations. Subsequent to that, we did scale back the requisitions modestly to more normal years, but they're still certainly higher for the most part, compared to kind of pre-COVID levels.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I note further on our agenda, we're going to have a discussion on the feasibility budget, and I'll be asking for a similar reduction for Area B. So I'm hoping for Area B residents, this would be fairly neutral, budget-wise. But I did want to note that, since we've been here at the table in the last 4 years, I'm seeing quite an increase in the requisitions that community groups are asking for. I mean, there used to be requisitions in the $1,000, $1,500 area, and now regularly we're getting $5,000 asks. And so I think, as prices increase and we're seeing a lot of inflation in the community groups are having to ask for more. So I just want to have that extra cushion in case, even if it's not just for Area B, if the other areas are requiring, we can support. I do believe that this type of granting should go across jurisdictions, and so just want to provide that cushion for myself for Area B. Director Grief.
I just want to make crystal clear the fact that as directors, as elected representatives of approximately 1/3 of the entire Comox Valley's population, this is the one and only discretionary function that we have, service, where we can actually support initiatives and facilities in the electoral areas. And it's no secret that I've always made a point of the fact that about 2/3 of all Area C's tax dollars end up in facilities and programs in the city of Courtenay. So I personally think that I would support this being a electoral area centric function. That being said, there'd be exceptions to that, but I'm not proposing we bring this forward now, but I think the public has to be crystal clear on the fact that when you use the parks in the electoral areas, it's only the taxpayers from areas A, B, and C that pay for that. And grant and aid, it's only A, B, and C. So, we kind of are not getting a free ride. In fact, I think the opposite out of this arrangement we've got. And I will keep adamantly bringing light to the fact that we are 1/3 of the population, and we get the beer budget, even though we have champagne tastes. So this is a very crucial part of our function as electoral directors, where we can actually support things in our community. Thank you.
Fully agree. Thanks, Director Grief. Director Arbor?
Yeah, I may temper a little bit that comment. I haven't done the analysis in terms of Area A. When you say 2/3 of our monies end up in the municipalities, I'm not sure that is correct, especially the way we're structured with all the different boxes. I think that when I talk to my residents, I say actually, the money you put into the Union Bay water system, or the money you put into the Royston water system, or the monies on Hornby and Denman with all the services, stay with that service. We do contribute to some regional budgets, the big ones being recreation, the hospital, waste management, which is actually, in Cumberland. And those are the big ones. There's not that many regional service. What I'm saying is I don't believe that the assumption that 2/3 of our money ends up in the municipalities is correct. I think most of the money spent in area A, a larger proportion would be specific to that area. So that's my take anyways. Thanks.
Any other comments on these functions on the grant and aid services, functions 120 to 124? Okay, seeing none, on receipt then, all in favor?
Move it.
Opposed, and that's carried. So Kevin, would you like us to move the functions separately in light of my amendment, or can we move them all at once, including that amendment?
Through the chair, it may be helpful if you want to amend specifically recommendation 2, that maybe they get done individually.
Sure. Okay. So function 120 has been moved by Director Arbor. I can second. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I'll move that we move that function 121 as amended with an extra 10,000 be approved. Seconded by Director Arbor. Comments? All in favor? Opposed? And that's unanimous. Function 122, here you see. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the Denman Island Grant 123. Second, moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And finally, function 124 for Hornby Island. Moved and seconded, and all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. All right, we will move on then to the financial plan for the feasibility services, functions 151 to 155. Moved and seconded for receipt, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Kevin, you're introducing the staff report with some support from your friends, I believe.
Thank you very much once again through the chair to the directors. So yes, well, apologies, we don't have a presentation formally set up for the service, but we do definitely have a team here that can present you an overview of the financial plans for these 5 feasibility study services. I'll start off with a brief overview of the nature of these services, and then I'll be turning it over to Derry Monteith and Mark Rutten to speak to various aspects of the projects being proposed, many of which will then be picked up when Derry presents her financial plan for the 340 liquid waste management service. So firstly, the nature of the feasibility study services. These services, as the name suggests, are used to analyze the potential creation of new CVRD services for the electoral areas. We did previously present to the CVRD board the regional feasibility service that all the participants within the regional district pay into. These 5 in front of you today are exclusive to the electoral areas. Of course, the planning services that are undertaken in each of these do not include direct personnel costs, nor do they include anything with respect to capital infrastructure. Only if, I believe one of these services has currently a reserve in place. The funding for each of these services is predominantly through tax requisition, and those tax requisitions are often very modest, and particularly with respect to what's being presented for you for 2022. Essentially no change to the requisitions compared to last year, with the exception of electoral area C, and that requisition is up approximately $15,000, and that is largely being driven by the addition of the allocation for the Macaulay Road egress study, which the delegation and Howie and his team spoke to previously. And then, of course, where appropriate, we do supplement those requisitions with either grant funding or often community work funds, again, where appropriate for any of those larger initiatives or studies. And so perhaps at that point, I'll turn it over to Derry, and she can speak to some of the initiatives that are being proposed for this year. Derry?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Through the chair to the directors. So I'm just going to go through some of the work plan items, as Kevin said, for these services, and then hand it over to Mark to provide the background on the rest. And as Kevin also mentioned, many of these projects will also be discussed in the presentation of the proposed financial plan for the liquid waste management planning service, which I believe is coming up next. So starting with function 151, this service includes electoral area A, excluding Denman and Hornby Islands, which each have their own, excuse me, feasibility function. The 2022 work plan for this service includes continued work on the Sewer Extension South project to support the current grant application. Funding for this project is provided by Area A, B, and C Community Works Funds, with revenues of $685,079 being carried forward to 2022. Under this service, we're also going to continue work to evaluate sustainable service delivery and cost recovery options for the Union Bay settlement node. And a watershed protection scoping study, which was initiated at the end of 2021, has also been carried forward into 2022. And this work allows for a better understanding of the potential watershed management roles of the CVRD, which will best serve the needs of the electoral areas. And it's proposed to be funded through functions 151, 152, and 153 shared equally. For function 152, Area B, Lazo North, the 2022 work plan includes only one item, which is the shared funding for the watershed protection scoping study just discussed. For 153, Area C, Puntledge Black Creek, the 2022 work plan includes shared funding for the watershed protection scoping study. And we also have some funds allocated to Electoral Area C liquid waste management studies, which includes servicing options for liquid waste management in the Saratoga Beach settlement node, should they be required in parallel with development in the area. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Mark to go through the remaining 153 projects.
Mark.
Great, thank you, Derry. Through the CAO and through the chair. I'm just going to highlight two additional projects here. So under 153, we include the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Local Service Area boundary expansion. These funds continue to support boundary expansion work to include Watuco within the Black Creek Oyster Bay service. And a brief update was provided by Chris this morning at the Black Creek Oyster Bay Water Committee meeting. And then secondly, our work on the Graham Lake Improvement District conversion continues in 2022 and that work will also be further discussed in an upcoming staff report at today's meeting for the Denman Island Water Local Service Area, and then also in a separate staff report coming in the spring to further describe and detail that conversion study work. I think the three of us are happy to answer any questions on this feasibility funds staff report and budget.
Thanks. I see a light on for Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the CAO and Mark. I know you mentioned the Watuco conversion, and I'm looking at a decrease in my feasibility study budget 153 of over $25,000. I'm wondering if it might be helpful to leave that in, and if it's not needed, carry it forward to the 2023. But I'm just wondering if it would be helpful to have that little bit of headroom there, because I think there's a lot of issues going mostly in the north of the Area C, and it might benefit from a little more capacity in that budget just in case.
Perhaps I can speak to that through the chair to Director Grieve. So just want to confirm that for the purpose of the Area C Feasibility Service 153, the requisition is actually up, as I noted previously, about 15,000 from last year. It was 13,000 last year and then 28,000 slated for this year. Part of the reduction in the overall kind of operating budget for this service is because there was a number of things that were completed last year and didn't get carried through. Some of which was the watershed scoping study work that Derry alluded to earlier. This is also where we have allocated the $25,000 budget for the Macaulay Road egress scoping work. So that has been included here as well, but certainly it is the prerogative of the director that if he wishes to look at some further funding availability to support other projects, certainly he can direct staff to do so.
Thank you very much. Just further to that, I wonder if Mark has any comment on the feasibility items that we're encountering in Area C.
Yeah, well, for the Watuco conversion specifically, I think we did produce an estimate a year or two ago for what we thought it would take. And as we progress that work, we just carry over the funds that we haven't spent. So I don't think we anticipate a change required for that particular project.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for staff for Area B. I do have a substantial amount of carryover, and apart from the watershed scoping study, not really a lot on the books. I do know that there are residents in the Lazo area that are considering joining the water service. So if there was a feasibility study asked for in that area, which I think is about 100 homes, could staff give an estimate of what that would cost? Or do I have enough in my carryover to fund that if I was to reduce requisition this year? I've got about 15, almost 60,000, it looks like, in surplus.
Through the chair to the directors, I can speak to at least part of that. So currently within the financial plan for 2022, we do have, as Derry spoke to, about $10,000 allocated in this service to support the remaining work for the watershed governance scoping study. But yes, correct. The balance of about $48,000, almost $500 is currently sitting as unallocated. So that means that over the course of this coming year, if any projects did come to light that would require any kind of feasibility work, we do have some substantial carryover that could be used to support that. Currently, as noted, the requisition for 2022 is about 12,000. So if it was the director's prerogative to scale that back, particularly as she noted with respect to the potential increase on the grant and aid side, it would still leave you approximately $36,000 to undertake any work that might be forthcoming.
Okay. Would staff like to comment on the cost? Would it fall under that 30,000?
Yeah, it may. It's a bit of a loaded question. So what we would appreciate is if a recommendation does come forward to complete a feasibility study for the addition of a neighborhood into the water service, that we come back after giving it a bit of thought and understanding the scope of the work a bit better, that we come back with the required funding for that.
Okay. Are staff aware of the costing? Like how much, I guess you can't guess how much a scoping study might cost, or a feasibility study for that, for 100 home area?
I mean, it depends on the amount of engineering required to, where is that area compared to the water infrastructure? Is that infrastructure large enough to feed that neighborhood? How spread out is the neighborhood itself in terms of what kind of a distribution system is required? So without at least reviewing a few maps and getting a better handle on the lay of the land and the proximity to existing systems, it's just hard to guess at,
Okay.
what it would take.
Okay, thank you. Director Arbor.
Sounds like a future delegation. Looks good, but I am just a little, we did pass a motion both at the ASC and at the board that we would look at a feasibility on Hornby and Denman for housing service, and I don't see it as part of this report. So hopefully that I don't have to be too concerned, but I would like that to be addressed because this is budget time, and those two motions were passed at ASC and the board.
Staff like to comment?
Through the chair to Director Arbor. So no, he is correct. Currently, we do not have any allocation specifically identified for the analysis of a potential housing service for either of the islands. We do currently have just under $10,000 in unallocated funding available between those two services, but certainly if the director would like us to include some additional dollars to help support some of that potential work going forward. We could certainly do that, and then certainly follow up with Alana Macaulay and her staff to kind of determine what the fulsome costs associated with that work might be.
Thank you. Definitely. I'll read the motion that the board passed, that the Electoral Area Services Committee consider pursuing a feasibility for a housing service in Hornby and or Denman as part of the 2022 Comox Valley Regional District Financial Plan. This study would review pathways to help fulfill the housing needs of each island and the possible supportive role of local government through a service. So yeah, before budget is over, I realize we have 3 weeks, but I do want that to be included and it's not just me. There's a board motion and an ESC motion that were passed to that effect. So I will expect that we at a future ESC meeting we will have a scoping on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Harbour. I don't see any more lights on. I think similarly, we maybe pass each of the functions separately in case directors want to adjust their budgets. So for Bain Sound Electoral Area A function 151, do we have a motion to? Oh, sorry, we're on receipt. Sorry. So sorry, we'll vote on receipt of the reports first. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And then recommendation 1 moved. And I can second. And comments?
Yeah, my comment on this one is I'm truly excited about the watershed protection feasibility that's underway. And sometimes in projects, elected official kind of see things a little bit later on the process. But with this one, I think the 3 directors would probably like to see as soon as we have a scoping and deliverables and a little bit more, because it can be so broad, right? Because it could include parks, or it could just include, how does this connect to the Comox lake? So early on, I think it would be wise to bring it to the elected official to kind of confirm that we're good with the scope of how broad or how narrow this is going to be. And on that basis, yeah, otherwise I'm really excited about the work. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. So on receipt then of that motion to approve function 151, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And then we have recommendation 2 for function 152. Moved and seconded. And I'll just comment that in light of the report of staff with a potential future feasibility study, I'll leave the budget as is and provide that extra cushion. Again, in case we see an extra need in the watershed scope, I too am also really happy to see that moving forward. Okay, so all in favor then? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Recommendation 3. Moved and seconded. And any comments on function 153? Director Grieve.
Thank you. I would amend it to look into, you know what? I think, making the point about potential feasibility study funding. We only have a little over half a year left, so I'm going to leave it as is at this point, because we don't have anything fixed on the horizon in Area C other than what has been identified so far. So I'll just move 3 as is then.
Okay, thanks. Moved and seconded, and I don't see any of the lights on. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And recommendation number 4 for function 154. Moved, and I can second, and I see, do you want to amend?
Yeah, I was gonna, well, you've moved and seconded it. I was gonna ask that we just defer those 2, the recommendation 4 and 5. So I don't know if you want to, I would propose that you withdraw it. Otherwise I would further move that.
I'm happy to withdraw. Does staff want to speak to that?
Sure, I can. Thank you. And the 154 and 155 being Denman and Hornby feasibility studies, we can come back to the March 7th EASC. You're correct. It was a resolution early in February and then board approved in mid-February. So we can come back to the March 7th and just round out those 2 budgets.
Thank you. And Director Grieve, are you okay to withdraw? Okay. So refer to the March 7th meeting. Okay. And do we vote on that? Yeah, so vote on the, sorry? Oh, I will second that, sorry. Vote on that deferral. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Thank you. And financial plan for the liquid waste management plan service function 340 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Derry Monteith, our manager of liquid waste planning, will present this this staff report on the LWP function. Derry.
Thank you, James. Through the chair and to the directors, I just have a brief presentation on the 2022 to 2026 financial plan for function 340. So next slide, please, Lisa. So the liquid waste management planning function was established in 2002 to provide management, staff resources, and funding to support liquid waste planning processes for the electoral areas. All property owners in the electoral areas pay a tax requisition for this service, and there's no change in the requisition planned for 2022, with an estimated tax impact of $22.50 for property assessed at $600,000. The 340 service provides planning and analysis only, so no provision for capital expenditures. And as such, much of the work completed within the service includes evaluation for improved wastewater and rainwater management through the creation of new services and the installation of required infrastructure. Oh, just back one, please, Lisa. Thank you. Professional fees for many of these projects are provided through the Electoral Area Feasibility Study service that we just discussed. However, staff resources are provided through Function 340 for all projects. Function 340 also provides management services for the Jackson Drive King Coho sewer services and the Courtney Flats drainage service. And the proposed budgets for those services were presented on February 14th to the committee. Many of the projects undertaken in the service are complex, multi-year and multi-jurisdictional projects requiring significant public stakeholder and First Nations engagement. And the climate crisis is also a significant driver for this service, as there are significant implications to water management as a result of climate change. So next slide, please. So we had a busy year in 2021 with a really diverse range of projects covering all three electoral areas. The function numbers shown in blue on the slide provided funding for professional fees or capital works for these projects. And you can see the septic education program and rainwater management work are funded directly by the 340 service. For on-site wastewater, we hosted 2 virtual septic education workshops in 2021, and these workshops will continue for 2022. And we're hoping to move back to an in-person format for at least one of the 2022 workshops. We also continue to progress work on the Hornby Island compost toilet project and the mandatory maintenance program. We completed the phase 2 planning work in the Solom River watershed in 2021. With results presented to the committee this past summer. As well, we completed a significant amount of planning work to support the Sewer Extension South project and hosted 2 community open houses for that project at the end of 2021. We also completed capital upgrades for the King Coho wastewater treatment plant over the summer and fall of 2021, which we discussed also at the February 14th presentation for that service. So next slide, please. So for 2022, we will see many of these projects carry forward with a few new proposed projects as well. We will continue project development work for the Sewer Extension South project through 2022 with public engagement and engineering and design being a key focus. We'll also continue to evaluate service structure and delivery options for Union Bay. As well, we will continue work on the watershed protection scoping study, which we just discussed. And as mentioned, the septic education program is proposed to continue with both virtual and hopefully in-person format for 2022. And we will also continue to collaborate with HURA on development of a program for the management of compost toilet residuals on Hornby Island, and also continue to progress work on the mandatory maintenance program for on-site septic systems. And we're proposing to present a monitoring program to the committee this summer. And work on the implementation of the electoral area rainwater management strategy will also continue this year with the development of a public education program, as well as completion of the Saratoga Beach Ecological Accounting Protocol project, which is currently underway. Next slide. So in addition to the tax requisition for function 340, community works funds totaling $44,595 are being carried forward into 2022 to fund both the on-site wastewater management program and implementation of the rainwater management strategy. The majority of 2022 expenses do remain unchanged from 2022 budgeted or 2021 budgeted values. However, operations costs have increased by approximately $38,000 due to an increase in professional fee allowances to support the proposed work plan, along with increases in things like postage, program supplies, and education programs due to additional Sewer Extension South project communication requirements, as well as septic education program requirements. So as of December 31st, 2021, the reserve fund balance for this service is projected to be $549,822. And these future expenditure reserves for this service are really important as they can be used to offset the cost of larger planning projects that would otherwise require an increase in the tax requisition for the service. So for this year at the recommended budget stage, staff are proposing that $150,000 be transferred from reserves into operating to be used to continue project development work for the Sewer Extension South project in support of the current grant funding application. As you saw with the feasibility function budget presentations, the Sewer Extension South project is jointly funded through the Bain Sound Feasibility Study Service and the Liquid Waste Service. But because the community works funds can be used for capital works, we're recommending using reserves from 340 to fund this upcoming planning work, which will then allow the funds under 151 to be allocated to project implementation. And so if the committee chooses to approve this recommendation, the resulting reserve fund balance for this service would be projected to be $399,822 at the end of 2022. And that's the end of the presentation, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Terry. I see Director Grieve.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to staff. This is a very difficult service to explain to our residents. They see it as a big budget item, which it is, with very little in the way of deliverables. I mean, when we look back at the Lazo Marsh Queen's Ditch report, and now we're getting the Saratoga Beach report, you know, these are well done reports that end up in a file somewhere because they are absolutely dependent, once again, on senior government partnerships. So I understand why it requires so much money. But once again, people ask me, well, what's it doing for me? You know, obviously, I think that the on-site septic education program, I mean, that's something that actually is beneficial to the community, especially if we go back to in person. I think that online stuff like that, you're only getting a handful of people anyway. But as I say, I mean, we've got great reports like the Queen's Ditch, Lazo Marsh one, that are, man, for lack of a better word, dead in the water. We're not, so we can't really point to any actual physical ramifications of what is this doing for me. So I just want to make that point. I think perhaps a little bit more of the budget could be spent on public education in general on this function, because it comes up time and time again. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Grieve. Does staff want to comment?
Sure, just quickly, and I can appreciate the comments and the sentiment that Director Grieve shares. I think this is one of those services that the behind the scenes work that is done is so crucially important to help inform the directors. And I know that you all know this, but it's so crucially important to help inform the directors about the path forward on some of these various initiatives. Without some of this study work and this analysis, there's a risk that the CVRD enters into territory that it's not prepared for and that it doesn't understand what the full implications are. And so while there isn't always a lot of maybe obvious and direct tangible outcome that you might see with some of the other services, I'll say it again, it's crucially important that the information is developed and understood and then integrated into our ongoing planning activities. So I just want to share that with the group.
Thanks, James. I'll maybe comment too about, specifically Director Grieve, you brought up the Clean Stitch report. And for me, as a fairly new director at the time, it was very interesting to see and extremely educational to have that report done. I think not just for me, but also the residents who were asking for a service to prevent flooding of their area, but not realizing that the cost would be. And, as we found in that report, it was astronomical. And with so few service participants, it just wasn't feasible. So sometimes when we don't see things going forward, you're not seeing any tangibles, but we're also not getting mired into multi-million-dollar projects that we don't have proper funding for. So, I can see your point though, because I had a slightly similar comment about the Solom River watershed study, because we've had these two great reports done. And now I don't know if staff have any comment about what we do with them. We have on-farm water storage kind of rising to the top, but do we move forward with that as an RD on our own? Do we wait until other levels of government fund that? I don't know if staff wanted to comment on that particularly, but we've stopped there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you through the CEO and through the chair. Derry, can you comment on some of the recommendations from the Solom River study work that we are still progressing, if there are some?
Yep, certainly. So to answer your question, Madam Chair, the work that we're doing on the watershed scoping study is really one of the key outcomes from the Solom River watershed work. And I think what we're trying to understand, or one of the deliverables from this next phase of project work, is just how can we potentially set up a service or make funds available to progress all of the action items that were identified under the Solom watershed plan and other similar action items or issues that are presenting themselves in other watersheds throughout the area.
Thanks. Sometimes I know we forget to connect those dots, and I've obviously forgotten about that. So thanks for the reminder. Director Arbour, you have a question?
Thanks. I like how sometimes engineering staff, just put a little sentence in those reports, and it's like a whole universe behind it. And in this particular presentation, I think for the first time in a number of months, we got a little gem about the status of our septic regulation potential work, where it was stated that next summer we might see something around monitoring. So I think there were a number of options in the report that was tabled a year ago. And I think in relation to the most major project in my area in regards to the South Sewage Initiative, it's good to know that by the summer we might have something. And I didn't hear mandatory clean out or anything like that. I heard we might hear about monitoring. So definitely piqued my interest. I'll go back to the report and read some more. Obviously, this could be work that applied to all of our areas. The report was pretty comprehensive in looking at all the options. So waiting for summer, that's okay. It does take us right to the end of the term. So I guess we would bring recommendations for or consideration for the next board. But as Director Grieve said, and as staff said, those are long-term difficult initiatives, in some cases necessary, but also difficult to get this, the public fully on board with those efforts, because not everybody may see those needs, but it's just part of proper governance, proper management of the land, proper way of doing things. Saratoga is another long-term issue, right? That Director Greaves been looking at, and it's good to see that we keep plugging away at it. We do want to see deliverables, and I think that's why staff says it's multi-year. So sometimes that work doesn't go as fast, but that is the nature of it. And I think even my first year when I saw the education session and looking at the Union Bay Hall packed with people really interested in the septic maintenance element and bringing experts and all the rest of it, there is some appreciation in the community. It's just, I just wish that we had a guarantee of outcomes at the other end. And that guarantee of outcomes also relies on political capital when key decisions come down eventually around those projects. I think that they're also require some political leadership. So we'll see. Thank you for the report, and it's nice to see a tiny decrease in the budget, but I couldn't see from the presentation. I mean, you did a decent job explaining how the different functions are utilized, as well as the role of Community Works Fund. We didn't have it in a full table. It might have been nice to see overall year to year when you put all these functions together, whether we're looking at an increase or decrease. But we are siloed. So in the context of this particular budget, it's down 95,000, and that's always good to see. Thanks.
Thanks. Do staff want to comment on the monitoring of septics at all?
Sure. Through the chair, to answer your question, Director Arbor, there was a report presented, if you recall, in November of 2021, just providing a bit of an update on the septic regulatory program options. And the motion carried at that meeting was to investigate options for environmental monitoring, to kind of designate priority areas for implementation of the project. And so we will be presenting that work, as I said, in the summertime for your review and decision.
Yeah. Follow-up?
So I want to take my previous comment back. You just triggered my memory about November. And I think earlier I said that last time we saw it was in the summer. And you're right. I guess it's been a busy time with all the different pieces of work. So thank you for clarifying that. That was actually a recent decision of ours to go down that road. I had actually forgotten. Thank you.
I don't see any other lights on then. On receipt of the report, all in favor? Opposed, and that's carried unanimously. And we have a recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
So that the financial plan for the liquid waste management plan function 340 be approved, and that includes an additional revenue of 150,000 to be transferred from reserve to fund South Sewer Extension Project, and that the transfer from reserves of that amount be included in the recommended financial plan. Any comments on that? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Great. Do directors want a time? Yes, we'll take a short 5-6 minute. Why don't we come back at 11:35? Short break for a tea and stretch.
Yeah, and we're on break now, but I'll make a comment for Dr. Grieve. I might suggest that we rename Greaves Crescent to Grieve Crescent, because I think that's probably why a lot of people call him Dr. Greaves.
Okay, I will call the meeting back to order. We are on item number 6, the financial plan for Comox Valley, Sandwick, Reeves Crescent, and England Road Water Local Service Areas, function 305, 06, 309, and 314 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Chris LaRose there's Chris. Chris LaRose is our Senior Manager of Water and Wastewater Services, and we'll be presenting this presentation. Chris.
Thank you, James. And through the chair, good morning, everyone. I'm just going to pull up a presentation that I've developed to help guide us through. Great. Yeah, so I've developed this brief presentation to help provide an overview of the proposed financial plan for Function 305, the Comox Valley Water Local Service Area. Just start us off really quickly with a little background around the service. So the service distributes bulk water from the Comox Valley water system to rural residents in a service area that wraps around the core urban area of the valley. So previously, this area was actually composed of 6 individual water local service areas that were operated as individual services. But in 2018, these were aggregated into the pre-existing Function 305, which was the largest previous water local service area, and they're now managed as a single service. So the aggregated service area has approximately just over 2,100 connections, all of which are metered. And several of the other 5 pre-existing water local service areas are still in place for the sole purpose of collecting a parcel tax that was implemented at the time of aggregation to facilitate kind of a equality of reserve contribution. So those 3 service areas that are still in place were ones where the average per connection reserve balance was lower than the average. And so they are being repaid over time, the latest of which will be decommissioned around 2028. So this water local service area is operated by our water distribution crew, led by Mike Hirschmiller. So some of the operators are shown here on the screen. In 2021, Mike and his team continued with implementation of our computerized maintenance management system, CityWorks. They were secured through a competitive process in 2020, I believe, and that work has been underway. It's a fairly large job to kind of convert and transfer all of our data into the CityWorks format and develop the processes that will govern how that software is used. And very simply, this software will so it is GIS based. It's actually put out by the same parent company as our GIS software is. So it makes full use of that tool, and it will allow for work orders to be generated for all types of preventative and reactionary maintenance, and allow much better tracking of that information by property, by service. So we're quite excited to have that in place. And as I'll touch on later, so we'll be completing that process this year. The team developed and delivered a system dead end flushing program for both pressure zones within the Function 305. This is quite a complicated piece of work to ensure that that all sections of the water system are adequately flushed without generating water quality issues for our residents. So that went really well. We also finalized licensing with the province to incorporate the old Sandwick reservoir site. So Sandwick is one of the 5 previous water local service areas that were kind of joined into 305. And that reservoir site is planned to be repurposed for the park, the Seal Bay Park, which it's embedded within. And finally, the team completed a whole raft of annual maintenance, repairs, and installation within the service area. So looking ahead to the coming year, We will be complete. We're planning to complete the final Sandwick decommissioning so that when we converted that service in 2016, I believe, there's a bunch of source water infrastructure, including a river well, a groundwater well, as well as the reservoirs that I just mentioned, all of which are no longer required now that that system is being fed off of the regional system. So we'll be completing the final steps of decommissioning that infrastructure. We'll be completing the installation and implementation of the computerized maintenance management system, CityWorks. We'll be maintaining and doing an update to our asset management plan that was developed several years ago, make sure that that is current and provides good input to the financial planning process. We'll be hoping to finally undertake this comprehensive rate review that was scheduled for last year, but has been kind of deferred by the constraints imposed on us by the COVID pandemic and the renewal plan. And then finally, we'll be supporting the Comox Valley Water System Water Master Plan, which is being initiated this spring. So there'll be, just as with the other municipal participants in the Comox Valley Water System, the Function 305 is a key user of water, and so we'll be supporting that process. A couple screen grabs from the CityWorks tool at the bottom there, just showing some of the results of the analysis that's possible with that tool. Yeah, so now I'll get into just a comparative kind of highlights of the financial plan itself. So comparing between 2022 and 2021. So for starting with the revenue, so we see a nominal 2% increase in rates to keep up with inflation, and that's consistent with our approach for all of our water local service areas. For personnel costs, we see a 3% increase. There's just due to a minor change in how operators are allocated between our water service areas, plus the regular increases due to the QP collective agreement. Just a reminder that personnel costs for this water local service area and our others is budgeted according to previous years, and that only actual costs are incurred or billed to each service. So the operators track their time on an hourly basis between the water services, and then that is what that's how costs are actually billed to the service, not based on projections from past year. Those are only used for this kind of financial planning purposes. The operating side, we see a 5% decrease in operating costs projected for 2022, largely due to the COVID renewal plan, reduction in bulk water rates, which is driving a reduced operating cost for the municipalities as well as Function 305. So that ends at the end of 2022. So the bulk water rate's kind of been held at 80 cents per cubic meter for half of 20, all of 21, and all of 22. And then I see a steep increase in that line item for this service starting in 23. And that's obviously incorporated into this 5-year plan. On the reserves, we have an average of approximately 375,000 per year over this 5-year plan, which is a significant improvement over previous years, but just under half of what was recommended by our asset management plan. So we'll be engaging with the EASC, with this committee, during that comprehensive rate review later this year, to ensure that the resulting program of rates reflect the priorities and objectives of the electoral area directors. There was a single capital project on the books for this year, and that is a project that's that you'll be familiar with. It's been on previous plans, and it was previously the Lloyd Road main replacement. That was just kind of closer to the area around Kin Beach, but we definitely spotted last year we spotted some synergies between this project and some necessary improvements along Astra Road. So this projects have been combined into a single project. That's how we plan to deliver it. And we're working with the Comox First Nation to avoid archaeological impact, specifically that that section, that circled or the oval, purple oval around that section through Kin Beach Park. It's a known archaeological area, a pretty significant midden. So we've put quite a bit of effort into developing some options on how to replace that line without any, minimizing any further impacts on that sensitive archaeological area. We'll definitely be working with the KFM Chief and Council to assess that and through the cultural heritage policy process. I just wanted to flag that last year, or the last financial planning process, the EASC approved $200,000 in community works funds towards that project. So to summarize, and just to relate the activities, the operational activities for this service back to our corporate strategic priorities. So first of all, from a fiscal responsibility perspective, we've been keeping up, with revenue requirements for the service through regular increases in 2019, 2020. We've seen, funneling any of the COVID-driven bulk water rate savings, channeling those into increased reserve contributions to put us into a better place for future, to help address our future infrastructure liabilities. And we, like I mentioned, we were committed to performing that detailed rate analysis in 22 to give a little bit more stability to the rates. From a climate crisis and environment perspective, the system is fully metered and we have a conservation rate structure in place to help us minimize the amount of water that's consumed out of the Comox Lake watershed. From community partnerships, just point to that recent aggregation of the service areas, and then the participation in this service under the Comox Valley Water System and representation in the Water Committee. And finally, from an Indigenous relations perspective, just highlighting how closely we're working with the KFN to ensure that our capital projects are mitigating any further impact to sensitive archaeological areas in the valley. So that's all I have today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris. I'm just waiting. I don't see any lights up, so I'll take advantage. The Astor Road, Lloyd Road water main, are you thinking that you might have to move around the park? Just wondering if you could put in some more details of what you would think might be happening to ensure that middens aren't compromised.
Sure, yeah. So it's been a little while since I've looked at it, but I do recall the two options being considered. Well, so one was pipe bursting. So there's an existing pipe through that area that was installed prior to our awareness of the sensitivity. And so there's a technology that allows essentially you use that pre-existing pipe and you pull or push, you force a new pipe with a kind of a spreader head on the tip of it, and you pull it through that old pipe, and it actually breaks the old pipe and replaces it in the trench. So that one would allow us to avoid much additional excavation to cross that area. But if I recall correctly, there were some complications just with the presence of some valves and stuff that might have to be dug up before that process is done. The other alternative we're looking at was actually going around that area. I think right now it kind of cuts through the park, and the alternative was kind of going up to the street or the parking lot, cutting across and then through, which was quite a bit longer, a farther distance. Mm-hmm. So both. So I'm not sure exactly where we're going to end up on that one, but we'll definitely keep the community apprised of where we're at.
Okay, thank you, Director Green.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to refresh my memory, Kin Park, was originally owned by the Kin Club. Is it now an RD park, or is it still owned by the Service Club?
I think it's I can't remember if it's a regional or a provincial park, but it's definitely one of those two.
Thanks, Chris. I believe Kin Park is a provincial park. I'm just looking over at Doug. Kin Park is a provincial park. Kin Beach Park is a provincial park.
So it's now a provincial park. Okay, there's a problem spotted. I don't know the Ken Club is still around, but they aren't as strong as it used to be. It was a favorite place for school and Sunday school picnics growing up. It was one of the best places for that. Now the pipe, that's going towards Air Force Beach, correct?
It's going in that direction, but it's really just crossing the park to get over to the Lloyd Road section. So you can see it at the bottom right. So it doesn't go beyond the end of Lloyd Road.
So Air Force Beach gets their water through the air base and comes that way? Would it be through Comox?
I believe that's the case. Yep.
Oh, okay. So there's still there's no opportunity of looping that or making it any, just a dead end.
Yes, that's my understanding.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see any other lights on, Chris. Thank you. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we have a recommendation.
Move it.
Moved and seconded that the financial plan for functions 305, 306, 309, and 314 be approved. Any comments? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And moving on to the Denman Island Water Local Service Area Function 307 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thanks, and over to Chris again for this one.
Great, thanks, James. And through the chair, just again pull up a PowerPoint. Bear with me. Great, yeah, so a very brief presentation to help guide us through this fairly straightforward financial plan. So yeah, very briefly, a brief overview of the service and the background. So that the distribution system in this area was built way back in the late 60s, and very shortly after that was converted to a regional district service due to ongoing water quality concerns. There's 23 properties in this service area. Day-to-day operations of the Denman Island Water Local Service Area are managed by the Graham Lake Improvement District, and that's as of the end of 2018. Prior to that, it was managed separately, operated separately, but there's very obvious synergies, operational synergies with the Graham Lake Improvement District, which is almost directly adjacent. There's about 15 properties in between. Revenue for the service is collected through a flat rate that is designed to match the Graham Lake Improvement District. So that was part of the arrangement that was set up when the new water supply agreement was established, putting the onus of operations on the Graham Lake Improvement District. We've had an ongoing process for the last several years, examining the feasibility of converting the Graham Lake Improvement District to regional service. And then in 2020, there was a grant opportunity that came forward, or for helping to resolve the longstanding non-compliance with the surface water treatment objectives for this service area. And the grant application was submitted contingent or subject to a conversion process if successful. So we did find out very recently in December or early January, after quite a bit of delay, that that grant application was successful. So now we're working intently on developing a path forward towards conversion and construction of the water treatment plant upgrades. So in 21, we were kind of in a bit of a holding pattern, waiting for the outcome of that grant funding, but taking the opportunity to progress and polish the conversion study and the planning for the water treatment plant upgrades, supporting the Graham Lake Improvement District on getting a pilot study in place to help demonstrate or prove out the preferred treatment technology should that grant application be successful. And here that map just shows the Denman Island Water Local Service Area on the bottom right, and Graham Lake Improvement District in the top left, the purple. The highlighted orange section was previously referred to as the Graham Lake Improvement District expansion area, but we did go through a process over the last couple of years to encourage or offer service to those properties, and most of them did not take us up on that. Looking ahead, it's going to be a very busy year for this service to support the continued discussions with the Improvement District on the amalgamation of the two services, or specifically the conversion of Graham Lake Improvement District as the first step. As a first step towards that, we're in the process of developing an MOU with GLID to help guide that conversion process and delivery of the water treatment project. And we'll be bringing that forward to this committee for review and approval sometime in the spring. And at this point, it looks like we're working towards a conversion date of January 1st, 2023. So this budget is very, very straightforward because it's largely just a flow through. We collect the funds, we pass it to all of it to Graham Lake Improvement District for operation of the service, and then we're allowed under the water supply agreement to bill back up to a maximum of $1,000 for our kind of administration of the service. Yeah, so just to summarize, we're given the successful grant application, which will help us to minimize the costs of compliance with the provincial requirements. From a climate crisis and environment perspective, we are making sure to select the water treatment plant upgrade system to be resilient to the projected impacts of climate change in this area. In terms of community partnerships, this is a great example. We're working very closely with this established other governance structure there to develop a sustainable long-term solution for the residents in that area, and possibly including provision of a bulk water service to the other, so that the other residents of Denman Island can benefit from this system as well and from this grant funding. And finally, from an Indigenous relations perspective, we are keeping the KFN up to date on progress on the water treatment upgrades and also on the potential for bulk water supply on Denman Island. So that's all I have today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Chris. I see Director Green.
Thank you. You mentioned the bulk water service, and I thought we visited that a couple of years ago and came very close and then unraveled. So we're still pursuing it. What were the challenges? Remind me again what the challenges were. And also now, if your well goes dry on Denman Island, do you have to truck water across on a ferry?
Yes, yeah, correct. So it wasn't so much, it was put on hold pending the outcome of the conversion process and I guess more specifically the water treatment project. Just given the uncertainty of supply, governance, etc. So it wasn't so much that there was any insurmountable obstacles to supply of bulk water on the island. In fact, we had developed a concept. It's more that we put it on hold just pending the outcome of all of this work with Graham Lake. So our assumption is that in the interim, you're right. The residents on Denman are being required to purchase water from off island and pay the ensuing ferry fee. So we understand that there remains a strong desire for this service or this kind of function on the island. But again, it's been on hold pending the outcome of this work. But now that we have, we're getting a pretty, the path forward is becoming clearer. I would envision that we would be in a position to, well, certainly we're keeping it in mind as we develop the terms of reference for the facility in terms of capacity, but it'll be front of mind as we move forward.
Yeah, thanks. I do want to say that as we had the fire hall meeting 3 years ago in Denman about this issue with GLID, I think, of course, capacity is the key issue, but I think I mentioned when we applied for the grant that there is definitely an expectation of a broader community benefit, because that's a pretty big grant for 100 to 120 homes. So if capacity is there, I will expect that, as we stated to the community, that we would look to restore some community access to bulk water. so that other residents of Denman also see the benefit of this public investment. With this in mind, what was my second point? Sure, it was equally as important. Oh yes, so I got to attend the Comox First Nation monthly meeting last week, and they spoke on this very project for a good 10 minutes. So definitely under Indigenous relation, let's make sure. And I brought up the bulk water as well and all those things, those potential. And so there's definitely a lot of both interests and some concerns around this, and mostly care about the future of water on both Hornby and Denman. I think Chief Rempel spoke about this. So yeah, great project. Great to see your timeline of 2023. And I'm sure we'll start some kind of, I guess it's not going to be broad community engagement. It'll probably be more focused on the users. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Graham Lake Improvement District has done a ton of engagement with their members. So that's firmly within the balls in their court on that one. We are we'll be planning some engagement with the Denman Island Water Local Service Area participants starting towards the later this year, just to let them know what's happening. But the plan is to convert GLID into a standalone service area rather than expand the Denman Island Water Local Service Area. So we're focusing on the conversion first. We expect that the broader community engagement with DILSA and with any engagement with the broader Denman community would be happening starting in 2023.
I don't see any other comments. We'll vote on receipt then. All in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. And we have a recommendation to approve function 307 budget. Moved, and I can second. Any comments on that? Hearing and seeing none. All in favor? Opposed, and that's carried. Function 530 to 530 house numbering services for receipt. Moved and seconded, and over to staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Kevin Duville will be introducing this report. Kevin.
Thank you very much. Once again, through the chair to the directors, very brief verbal report. These three services in front of you now are very stable and very modest in their annual requisitions. And of course, as the name suggests, these are here to support any necessary house numbering activities within the electoral areas that may take place from year to year. So largely these services provide a very modest contribution back over to our electoral areas planning service, service 500, to support any of the GIS work that's required to undertake that house numbering work. Overall, we requisition combined with these three services about $2,500 annually, of which about $1,600 of that goes directly over to the planning service. So as indicated in the report, anywhere from 60 to 68% of the funds collected here go directly to support that work within the planning service. As we've noted, no capital associated with these services, nor are there any reserves established. Again, very modest requisitions, and the overall tax impact for a home assessed at $600,000 would be about 12 cents. So not a lot of tax impact overall. I'll probably leave it at that and certainly respond to any questions.
I don't think anyone's got questions. So this is an easy one. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And we've got a number of recommendations.
Move 1, 2, and 3.
Is it all right, Kevin, if we do it concurrently for you? Yeah, so I can second that. We'll move function 530, 31, and 532 together. Comments?
That's going to cost both.
Yeah, hearing and seeing none. All in favor of moving all three? Opposed, and that's unanimous. Thank you. The financial plan for heritage conservation function 691 to 695 for receipt.
Good.
Moved and seconded. Over to staff.
Thank you. And Alana Macaulay, our General Manager of Planning and Development Services, will introduce this report. So over to Alana.
Thanks. Welcome, Alana. Great, thank you very much, Chair. Through Chair Hamir to the directors, I'm here today to present our, there we go. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'm here today to present our 5 heritage conservation budgets. While Lisa pulls up this presentation up on the screen, I'll just say that the Local Government Act requires the establishment of a service if a regional district wishes to undertake any heritage conservation planning work. Technical difficulties. So we have 5 heritage cultural services, and these have been used to provide funding to nonprofit organizations in order to undertake cultural heritage conservation initiatives. In the past, you might recall projects relating to conservation of built heritage, natural heritage features and landscapes, artifacts, and celebratory arts and cultures events that have a relationship to our cultural heritage. So revenue within the service is derived almost entirely from tax requisition. Grant funding, if and when available, can be accessed to support a particular project or initiative. Otherwise, surplus funds are carried forward to the following year. So in a moment, you'll note that there are no changes proposed to the requisitions in any of these services in 2022. You'll also note in a moment that there are no direct personnel costs. Terrific, thanks, Lisa. Great, thank you. So there are no personnel costs associated with any of the 5 conservation budgets. Rather, staff in electoral areas planning function is assigned to undertake work as it arises. Any increases in the operating budget of a given service is attributed to the prior year surplus, so commensurate with the increase in revenue. So for 2022, only 1 new project has been identified. And this is the Brant Oyster River Hermitage Society's archiving project. And we do have a couple of members of the Brant Oyster River Heritage Society on the line who can provide you with an update if you'd like about some of their work, and also speak to a little bit more detail around staff's recommended allocation. So staff is recommending allocation from the Area C Heritage Conservation budget in the amount of $23,200 for use by the Society on archiving the significant work and legacy of Father Charles Brant and the hermitage that exists along the banks of the Oyster River. So in 2022, our work plan priorities, there are opportunities within these services to think about the work that you may wish to undertake as directors over the coming years to decolonize our community's understanding of our cultural heritage in the Comox Valley. But at this time, we are proposing, as I said, a funding allocation to the Brant Oyster River Heritage Society in the amount of, thanks so much, Lisa, there we go. We can either, okay. I'll just do it verbally, not to worry. Yeah, in the amount of $23,200. I don't know why that's hard for me to say. For their work to archive the significant written, photographic, and oral history bequeathed by Father Charles Brant in a project that will link the cultural heritage and natural heritage of this property, and sow some important seeds for the realization of the Society's vision, which was developed with Father Charles Brant, which is, and I'll just quote here, "The forest and house of the Hermitage is to be preserved as a peaceful center for contemplating the spiritual foundations of ecology and nature as a sacred commons, and as a home for a designated Catholic hermit or other contemplative person dedicated to the environment and a life of contemplative prayer who shares this vision. The human community and the natural world will go forward into the future as a single sacred community, or we will perish in the desert. Only the sense of the sacred can save us." I know that these words will resonate with many of you, given the CVRD's strong relationship with this 27-acre property on the banks of the Oyster River, as it has been entrusted to the CVRD, or will be, at the request of Father Charles Brant upon the settlement of his estate. At this point, I would ask that if George Wall would like to make any comments to you about the project at the Society's proposal for 2022, that he be able to do so. If that's not too much additional technical. George, you can unmute yourself. Great. And
I'm just looking for the
there you go.
button. Alana, thank you so much. And on behalf of the Brant Oyster River Hermitage Society, I'm speaking on behalf of our chair, Bruce Weitzel, and also our secretary, Willa Cannon, and our resident contemplative, Karen Nickel. I'd like to thank Madam Chair, the staff, and the directors for considering our grant application. We're at a stage where we are in the throes of archiving Charles's material, and it's just a beautiful collection of environmental projects that he's worked on for over the last 40 years in the Comox Valley, and the number of people that have come forward that have been inspired to undertake environmental programs in the valley is quite inspiring. We've just managed to engage Jennifer Iredale, who is the former head of BC Heritage, to help us generate a statement of significance, which will capture the values that Charles that brings to the community to engage with the natural environment in a way which is non-confrontational, to work with government, to work with different interest groups, to work with industry, forestry, mining, to find solutions as to how we can decrease our footprint on the environment and live in a more collaborative way with the natural environment. I think that's all I want to say at this point. We're building an electronic database of Charles's archive, which we hope will largely be available to the public. There's quite a few Man Alive CBC program. There's all sorts of heritage videos of Charles that we are posting for free on YouTube as well, so people can get a flavor of his contribution to the Comox Valley. Charles won last year Museums Canada Lifetime Achievement Award, so we have a titan in our backyard, and it's wonderful if we can celebrate his life, but also learn a little bit about what he's trying to teach us about caring for the natural environment. And I'll just end it there. And thank you so much for considering our application.
Thanks so much, George. Before I move it over to Director Grieve, I just want to thank you for your extremely detailed application, and your budget was, so really well detailed. So it was a pleasure to read, and thanks for all your work. Director Grieve.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for this, for actually coming and presenting this. I was very fortunate in early on in my elected career to have met and worked with Father Brant. We had a Fisher Farmer Forestry Forum, and I asked him to come and say a few words at the opening, and it was just amazing how he set the tone. We had fisheries there and forest companies and everybody just settled right down. He was an amazing person, and I kept bumping into him, of course, at the Soul River enhancement meetings and stuff. But my question is, with the society now, first one is, are the archives going to be kept on site? Is that the plan, to make like a mini museum in the Hermitage somewhere to keep this stuff, or are you going to put it someplace a little more secure?
There's discussions that I think are in front of us with staff of the Comox Valley Regional District to determine what is the path forward. So those are discussions that are on our doorstep with the CVRD, and we'll be able to answer those at a later point.
And the actual Hermitage site itself is a covenant between CVRD, Comox Valley Land Trust.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so and then so the society does the society pick the hermit in residence? Is that a decision made by you guys?
That is also part of the discussions with the CVRD. Our understanding from Charles, his intent is that the Brant Oyster River Hermitage Society is to maintain the building, but also to manage the continuation of a hermit living within the Hermitage, and to facilitate that in whatever way we can. But there's a lot, I think, of question marks that have to be sorted out between CVRD and us, because it's not totally clear how we are going to work together. So there's a potential lease agreement that we're looking at negotiating. We're still waiting for the estate process to finalize. So that's sitting ahead of us. Right now, what we're doing for the estate is we're managing the archiving process on behalf of the state, and that will simply transition to whatever continues after the estate is finalized.
So there's a few loose ends yet to tie up.
Yes, definitely.
And a few lawyers who will extract their pound of flesh. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Director Grieve. I didn't have a question for George, but I had one for Alana. This function, I'm wondering if you could explain how an organization would apply for the funding. Is this something similar to the grant and aid, or is this something that staff work, alongside an organization to put forward an application?
Through Madam Chair, I think I just heard Director Reeves say that we've had both, and yes, that is during my time here, it has been the same. So we have seen initiatives brought forward by individual electoral area directors, and then we've also just had conversations in the community. So this particular item came up when George reached out around some questions about the negotiations and discussions that he's referencing. But in the past, for example, when in Area B, the previous Dr. Jim Gillis brought forward a proposal around the estuary and the documentation of the fishing weirs. That was brought forward by him. And then, for example, in Area A, we've often worked with the Union Bay Historical Society to do some of their archiving work, as well as modifications and restoration efforts to the jailhouse and the post office building.
Great, thanks for that explanation. And is there a deadline, or do you take applications or funding like throughout the year?
Through Madam Chair, I would say that we haven't formalized an application process as has been done for the rural grant and aid projects. This primarily has been a phone call, a bit of a back and forth, and then a proposal similar to what you've seen Mr. Wall present here on behalf of the society, and that's the way we've worked primarily when it's with community groups. I have received a couple of calls from some folks on Hornby who have expressed some interest in doing some archival work for Hornby. And so if a group can't put a proposal together through the year, then certainly they could reach out to staff and we could help connect them with this budget.
Great, thank you.
If I could add, as shown, these are very modest budgets, very, very small in requisition. And so I think that may be in part why we don't see any sort of formal or robust process when it comes to requesting community input and an application process.
Sure. Are there limits to the request? I mean, I am seeing a fairly sizable amount of reserve in Area B. So
through Madam Chair, you do note in each of the services prior year surplus carry forward, which gives them that dollar amount. Kevin, if you could help me out here just with the maximum requisition on each of the services. Sorry, I don't have that in
Oh,
front of
sorry.
me.
I didn't mean tax requisition. I meant like an ask from.
Oh, pardon me.
From organizations.
Through Madam Chair, no, I think, in this case, I can give, potential applicants a indication of what is in there, and then certainly it would be up to them to put something on the table.
Director Arbor?
Thanks, and it's nice to see the proposal in Area C there around Father Brent's place. I'm supportive. But I think what the chair just highlighted is, and our acting CEO is, these are very minimal amount kind of afterthought budgets. And what's clear is we don't have a strategy for those services. So we know that, I'll draw some links here. We know that at the planning level, we are now wrestling with Comox First Nations cultural heritage policy, right? And so could those services be considered to support that in the future? Do we want to open to nonprofits? To what extent? It's been mostly ad hoc and based on merit, but as I think the chair just drove home, we don't really have a process for them. With the level of requisitions, one would start asking whether we should do away with the functions altogether. Because, at $3,000 or $1,000 a year, $1,000 there, is it worth being in there? So what I would recommend is maybe later on, or maybe next term, that the EASC has a strategy session around the future of those functions. Because right now they're very small, and we know they can play a role, but we haven't really defined what that role is. Thanks.
Dr. Green?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I might say though that this function is been used regularly, of course, and it's I think based on situations arising that were unforeseen, that have a heritage component to them, and it fits a little bit outside the box of our regular community grant and aid. So. I don't know. It's not. It's in addition to, and the focus is on heritage. So I've used it a couple of times, and also supported some First Nation activity, as you probably know, with their journey that one time. So we stepped up and really helped out there. So it's kind of on the back burner. It's very minute. My question to the staff, though, is so am I actually going to be sitting in a negative $8,960 on balance on this? Is that what's going on?
Through Dr. Grieve, Lisa, I wonder, where do I point this? Great, thank you. If you could just advance, please. There's Area C on the right.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is that leaving me in deficit on this? Because it can't really run a deficit. So I'm just trying to figure out how that works.
Great. Through Madam Chair, that number, a decrease of 8,960, that shows you the year-over-year decrease 21 to 22. So please look at the number under 2022 proposed budget column. Please look at the number $26,399. So that's the amount that would be sitting in the Area C service.
So I'll still end up with about three grand left.
Correct.
To build.
Yes, thank you.
And that's including our requisition of 10,000 this year.
Correct.
Yeah, it's a slow process building it up. Okay. The question, I guess, through to Kevin would be: is there any possibility of increasing the requisition for a one-time on this, or what is the limit on the requisition?
Through the chair to Director Grieve. So yes, right now, as Alana noted, the requisitions are slated to hold firm from last year. So in the case of Area C, $10,000. I mean, all of these services do have some fairly substantial maximum requisitions, so that certainly wouldn't be an issue with respect to any potential one-time bump, depending on the nature of those. Currently, as Alana did note, yes, I mean, largely as a result of less surplus carry forward from the prior year, that's why you're seeing that roughly $9,000 decrease in the overall budget. No, that does not leave you a deficit. It just results in, you know, a little less surplus carry forward being available to fund some of that work. And again, it's also driven, as she's noted, by kind of the work plan anticipated. You know, again, we have, you know, often provided some small grants through these services, although I know in other regional districts, many have a more of a planning directed focus for a lot of these services. And actually, for some better context, I believe prior to 2012, these services were all one single combined service, but at that time it was felt for a number of reasons to split them out to each of the electoral areas. Obviously, with electoral area A, they were split to also take into consideration the unique nature of Denman and Hornby Islands.
Okay, so basically, if I could ask for an increased $10,000 requisition on this, so there's a little bit left in the kitty.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. You know, I'm gonna second Director Arbor's comments about you know, a future strategy session. I think it would be worthwhile because I think this particular service is not very well known in the community, and we do have a strategic driver on reconciliation that I think personally fits really well with this heritage conservation funding, and would love to see more of that funding moving towards our goals of reconciliation myself, and seeing how much I do have in surplus. That's, you know, that would be a huge goal for me. But whether or not that requires staff to then start approaching First Nations, or how we make that known, I think is kind of where I'm thinking we need some work done. So, Director Arbor?
I think we're having a strategy session now. So, you know, as I again, I'll reiterate, with the cultural heritage policy coming from Comox First Nation, which is very a sea change in terms of what the requirements of local government will be in the future, and also bearing in mind what Kevin Duvail just said around how those functions can be utilized in other regional districts. I know that the cultural heritage policy of KFN is going to add work demand to both the CVRD and to developers in the community at large. So if there's a roadmap to see how we resource that work in a specific way, working alongside Comox First Nation, absolutely, I'm on board as well, because that's work that's going to be needed and is already needed to be done. So yeah, I support the chair's comment.
Thanks. I don't see any other lights on, so we'll move on receipt then. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. And we've got a couple of recommendations, I believe. So the first one is that the financial plan for the 4 functions, 691, 692, 693, 94, and 95 be approved. Moved, seconded, all in favor? Oh, apologies. Before we finish that, Director Grieve, did you want an adjustment to your budget?
No, at this point, I think it's wise to wait and maybe review this before the 2023 budget.
Okay.
And what we want to do with it. I think it's important that we look at all aspects of heritage. And I think Father Grant is, and this particular ask, speaking to recommendation 2, of course, is something we can all support. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So then that is carried for recommendation 1. And then we have recommendation 2. Moved and seconded. And any other comments? Okay, we'll vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Thank you. And the financial plan for street lighting services function 710 to 750 for receipt. Move, and I can second, and over to staff.
Got some questions on this.
Okay.
Maybe.
We're just going to pull the presentation up.
And Madam Chair, I'm pleased to introduce Michael Zabarski, our Manager of Transit Facilities, who will introduce this series of budgets. How many? 7? 12. 12. Over to you. We gained one this year. Yeah, hopefully the PowerPoint works. If not, I can kind of go for it. Give you a second.
Seeing as it was a bit delayed last time, you could start.
Okay, so yeah, so through the chair to the committee, quick presentation on the street lighting services function 710 to 750. So street lighting does a number of things out in the electoral areas. One of the kind of emerging needs I think that we're all becoming very aware of is promoting some of the multimodal active transportation initiatives. So providing a safe place for people to walk or bike within the road right of ways that typically don't have any kind of path or sidewalk adjacent to them. There we go. And there's a picture of a couple of people walking along Dyke Road where we have one of our service areas. And next slide, please, Lisa. So currently we have 12 street lighting service areas. The oldest one, I think, is the Little River service area, and we just gained the Union Bay service area in 2022, but it may actually be older than the Little River one. So we now have 12. There's about 437 lights. They're owned by BC Hydro and used under agreement by CBRD within those service areas. And we also have 8 that we own out in Forest Grove Estates service area. And that's a picture of what that one looks like. It's more of an ornamental light than a street light. Next slide, please. So as you all know, last year BC Hydro decided to convert all of their street lights to LED, and this was done to comply with some federal regulations. The new LED lights should last longer, should require less maintenance, use less energy, and the cost of doing this conversion was incorporated into a new hydro rate that took effect last year and has been our budgets are based on that. And that's a picture of one of the new LED lights. These came in to our area in about May, June last year. Next slide, please. So last year's work plan included a little bit of repair and maintenance on the Forest Grove Estates lights that we do every year. We actually removed a solar light that we owned down in Royston. That's a picture of what we had down there. It was just not working, especially in the middle of winter when we don't get a lot of sun. There would be days of no street lighting there, and it was a fairly busy intersection with a lot of pedestrians and cars. And so we made the decision to replace that with a standard BC Hydro light. We did relocate it across the street so that the old one was actually on the water side of Marine Drive at the bottom of Ration Road, and the new one's not on the water side. So providing illumination to that area, but hopefully less visual impact of the foreshore there. And then we also tried to support BC Hydro in their LED conversion program, which was a bit of a challenge last year, as you probably all know, with a number of people experiencing some light pollution issues within their homes. 22 work plan is again to deal with the Forest Grove Estates lighting that we own. And we're going to be working with BC Hydro to address some billing and inventory discrepancies. So when they did their LED conversions, they updated their inventories, and there's a little bit of an issue with what we're getting billed versus what they're telling us we actually own or have. So we'll be working with them to sort that out. And next slide. This chart just shows you the tax requisition between last year and this year and the variances. Most of them are going up a little bit, and that's primarily due to that LED rate that BC Hydro is charging, which is a little bit more than the previous rates. About 10% kind of on average, depending on what wattage the fixtures are. And next slide is the end. So a couple more photos of the new LED lights there out in the rural areas, so you can kind of see the types of environments that they're in. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Both of I don't know who had first. I'll go with Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess on the budget front, we already discussed that, we were expecting savings because LED consumes less energy. But I think what you explained last time is they've built in the cost of capital replacement. And we end up with a plus 10%, which is, I guess, that's how it goes. I can understand how they would do that, but I think a lot of people were actually expecting a savings. And the numbers aren't that big. I think that we can survive for the most part. But yeah, the light pollution, I guess, thank you for your efforts in responding to residents who had concerns. I know that in a few instances, those were resolved through changing the direction or whatnot. And in others, I think people may still be grumbling about it when there's no obvious solution. It does feel a little brighter out there. Yeah, ultimately, I think our message is this was not requested by the CVRD for one thing. I think this was a provincial policy, which I think everybody can support the intent, which is to reduce the overall energy consumption across the system. But it just so happened that the LED lights, yeah, they give a slightly different spectrum, which can be good for safety. Not so good when you're in a living room and it's shining in your window. Thanks.
Director B?
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's odd that, you get LED lights that burn 1/5 electricity of incandescent or sodium, high pressure sodium lights. So they compensate by putting up the price. Anyway, that's interesting. My question is around that infamous Royston solar light that we put in. A little background for the newer directors was that there was a light down there, and somebody had the ability to get in touch with Hydro and have it removed because it was bothering their wife or something. And it was removed as a surprise to everyone. And then we came up with this solar light, which was fairly early on. I think they're probably more efficient now. So what happened to that light? Where did it go? Are we using it somewhere else? Or?
Yes, the light was donated to the solid waste service, and they're using it up at the Pigeon Lake landfill.
Oh,
somewhere within on their site there. I can't remember exactly where they planned to put it, but it's been repurposed within a CVRD facility.
Interesting. And the other thing is, I remember we had a situation in Area C where we had, because my understanding is that this is where we had a discussion a few years back about, is it an MOTI light? Is it a BC Hydro light? Is it a CVRD light? But there was a street light right beside the Black Creek Oyster Bay Fire Hall, Oyster River Fire Hall, that was burned out for somewhere something in the neighborhood of 1.5 years before it finally got fixed. And I think you were pursuing it, but everybody said, oh no, that's a highways light or that's a hydro light. So it took 1.5 years to get fixed. So we got another situation right now in Area C where you probably know that Island Highway was closed a couple of weeks back because somebody took out a power pole. And there's 3 streetlights right on the corner of 19A and Coleman Road. And they haven't been reconnected either. So I'm just wondering, who should I be phoning? Maybe you can get back to me on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I can look into that one and
yeah,
find out whose those are.
It can go on for years. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't see any other lights on or questions. Thanks, Mike. On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And can we move all of the functions, all the services together?
Sure.
Yes. Thank you. And please don't make me read them all out. Any questions on that? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Next up, Hornby Island Refuse Disposal Service, function 360 for receipt. Moved, and I can second, and over to staff.
Thank you. And Jesse Lee, manager of Comox Strathcona Waste Management Operations, should be on the line and will be able to speak to this report and the following 2 reports on Denman and Royce. Jesse, are you on the line?
Yeah, yes, I'm here. Thanks, James.
Great. Over to you, Jesse.
Okay, thank you. Through the chair. This is just sorry, myself here. This is to provide the proposed budget for the 2022-26 financial plan and highlights for the Hornby Refuse Service function. So the Hornby Island disposal services provided under agreement by the Hornby Island Ratepayers Association. And this is to provide waste disposal and recycling services to Hornby residents. The 2022 tax requisitions proposed to increase by $140,000. So that's from $260,000 to $400,000. And that would place the operating budget at approximately $436,000 for this year. Some of the results of the increase are reduced surplus from HERA's budget, higher transfer for HERA's core services costs, and the wage and benefits package, including some additional staff to deal with the increased volumes that have occurred over the last year and a half, basically from the visitors to the facility. So that results in an increase of approximately, what are we here? Sorry, glasses. $248.16 for an annual assessment of $600,000 per resident. So at the time of this report was written, there was potential that HERA wasn't going to be able to obtain insurance, so to continue to operate the facility. But as of, I believe it was Thursday or Friday, they have obtained insurance, so now they'll continue to operate the facility under agreement. What else do we have here? So then the other aspect, so just in summary here for the reserve functions, it's recommended we keep a minimum of $50,000 in the reserve. There's approximately $58,000. So we'll continue to do that. There's a modest capital reserve as well of about $14,000. So it'll be a small contribution of approximately $1,700 per year into the capital reserves. If there's any questions.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you.
Director Arbour?
Yeah, this is a difficult one, not only for the last couple of months that we've had in regards to the whole insurance issue, which was resolved on Friday, but also from a budget perspective. You know, in 2018 when I got elected, I think the requisition was at 200,000, and 4 years later, we're now at 400,000. So that's 100% increase over the course of my term. Not insignificant. And I do understand some of the drivers around that. But the level of service, I think, arguably has remained comparable to what we had in 2018, unless I'm thoroughly mistaken on that. And then the second piece that I'm having a hard time to reconcile is HIRA approved requisition at its December meeting of about, as I recall, 330 or 340, but this budget is calling for 400. And so usually HIRA budgets kind of come to the RD and are presented as they are. And I don't know if there's been an impact from the potential anticipation of a change due to the insurance issue, but I'm trying to figure out why it is that at their December meeting, they had about a much lower requisition presented to the community. And by the time it gets to us, it's at the 400,000 requisition level. I don't know if staff can provide insight into that.
Yeah, I could speak to your first question there, just about from 2018 when you mentioned about service, and one of the biggest things, we have added a few additional services there since then, some more stewardship programs, and with that they are labor intensive, that's for sure. And the volumes of recycling, we bale a lot of material there, and then just increased volume, both in the garbage and the recycling. And I'm trying to think of what we've added since then. There's been a few, and then there's in this year's budget is proposed 2 additional staff as well. So that's one that would work to collect fees, which the supervisor was doing before, but this will free that person up to do other aspects of the job opposed to collecting the fees. So that's one and then one potentially associated, but depends on the COVID mandates, was associated with the free store. And if the mandates, which seem to be changing back when the budget was proposed, that position though could be reviewed and not considered moving forward if restrictions change. As far as some of the other aspects, maybe Kevin, I don't know if you could, it was a result of around the surplus and stuff. Maybe Kevin could assist in that.
Certainly through the chair to the directors. So based on, this budget is largely based on a 5-year operating grant submission that we do receive from HIRA annually. So I just did pull up the 22-26 budget that was actually approved by the HIRA Assembly, I believe, back in November. And at that time, it did indicate that they'd be requesting an operational grant from CBRD to the tune of $395,000. So that is what we actually currently have in the financial plan for 2022. That is slated to reduce modestly in 2023 and going forward by about $50,000 or $60,000, but it still is in that certainly that 300,000 plus range over the current 5-year financial plan. And as Jesse did allude to, the way we do fund these services is, we do ask them to kind of take a look at, what their surplus or deficit would have been kind of 1 year out. So for this particular financial plan, we're looking back at, what their surplus or deficit would have been coming out of 2020. And it's just a timing of when their financial audit or financial engagement takes place. And that's largely what's driven, certainly the increase this year. As I said, it does settle back in those forecast years over the remaining portion of the 5-year financial plan.
Madam Chair, if I may, so yeah, there's something to be clarified here because, I'm looking at the document on an Excel sheet approved by HIRA Assembly, as you say, in November. So on all that, we agree. I'm fetching it from their website, and I recall it from then. The net revenue is indeed listed at $395,000, but that includes tipping fees collected. And the CVRD operation is listed at $339,472. So either I'm thick and I don't really understand what's being presented, but I see net revenue of $395,000 in there, but not the requisition, because obviously they have tips collected. So I just grabbed that from their website, and at the top of the document said approved by HIRA Assembly. That's it. And the reason why it's important is, that is, if there is a discrepancy, that would be almost a $60,000 one. So I don't know if Manager of Financial Services has feedback, or whether we want to wait and bring it back at March 7th so we can confirm all this.
Through the chair to Director Arbor. So again, we'd have to go back and kind of verify. I'm again looking at what HIRA did provide us by way of a 5-year budget submission, and it clearly indicates a net revenue budget of $402,000 for 2022, and that's largely derived by a contribution from the CVRD of $395,000. Yes, correct. They do have tipping fees collected to the tune of about $100,000, but then of course they do also collect basically a core service or administrative fee that HIRA then uses to kind of offset their costs associated with managing the various services that they look after on behalf of the CVRD. So yeah, I don't know much more of what I can say than that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll just try to make sense of it myself after. Have we seen a similar 100% kind of increases over the last 3 or 4 years, say in other waste management services? So the big one, or some of the other one that may have existed? Like, what is the trend around all this? Is it just as we add those streams everywhere? Because I don't see, maybe we are getting much better recycling outcomes and all that. But we have the Royston budget coming up later and the Denman Island one, and I don't seem to see such large increases as we're seeing over the 3 or 4 year period. Or am I incorrect?
Yeah, I mean, comparatively, yeah, Royston would be difficult just being curbside program. Denman doesn't offer the same amount of services, but for similarities of service, yeah, all of our facilities have seen an uptake. Gull River, which is a big population, around 1,000, has seen a drastic increase as well last year on the garbage side and recycling as well. Here at the Comox Valley, that one as well, this has been quite busy here. Our numbers have been, everything's been going up. There's not one facility that's actually seen a decline or anything like that. So the numbers actually from 2 years ago now, like when COVID started, it's been a projectile on all of our facilities. So.
Go ahead.
Yeah, one last one is just, I guess the 5 year financial plan didn't hold up, because if you go back to the 2018 5 year financial plan for this service, we would be sitting at still about a couple $100,000 requisition. So
yeah,
that was the 2018 5 year plan. So that there goes the 5 year plan. And I guess I'm comforted by your words that this is not the only service that is being affected. Thank you.
No, not at all. And I mean, since then too, the organization's unionized, which has resulted in a few higher wages. A wage package, the sick benefits, they've never budgeted before for sick benefits as well. So that's another aspect that they're carrying now on that.
Thanks, Jesse. Did Seth want to comment too?
Only to say that, yeah, when we look back at 5 year plans from 4 and 5 years ago, we do our best to look forward and project as best we can, knowing the external factors and the internal factors and service delivery and we do that annually. So we're adjusting those 5 year plans annually to try to anticipate and try not to see significant changes in requisition or tax rates. That being said, each year we are taking a good hard look at what the services are required and requested by the directors. And so we will see some adjustments over time.
Yeah, I guess people start to pay attention when, this is an average, as it says in the report. It's now an average of $250 per home. And then additional to that, we also obviously pay the landfill service as well. So it starts to be one of our most expensive service, and maybe that's okay. Just thought I'd ask those questions. There's not a lot of ways out of it by the sounds of things.
Thanks, Director Harbour. I don't see any questions on receipt then. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. We have the recommendation. Moved and seconded by Director Harbour. Any comments? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. Would directors like to break for lunch for a bit of, no? You want to keep going? Okay, we do have lunch though, just so you know.
We could grab it
and continue eating. Yeah, do you want to do like just we'll come back at 1 and grab lunch and we'll have a working lunch? Okay. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. We're working and eating at the same time. So the next item on the agenda is the Denman Island Garbage Collection Service, function 362 for receipt. Moved and seconded, and back to staff.
And Jesse, I think you'll take these next two, right?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. So through the chair, so this is to provide a proposed 2022-26 financial plan for Denman Island garbage collection service. So the requisition is proposed to increase for 2022 from 88,000 to 127,500. But there will be a slight decrease in the in the taxation rate based on the assessed value of property. So there'll be a bit of a decrease from 0.8 to 18 cents to 17. So per 100,000 or $600,000. Sorry. So that, anyways, that reduces the requisition slightly for the next couple of years. So it's a pretty small service, just providing garbage recycling, garbage is collected through the curb, and then it's just a small depot for recyclables. And that's about that. Is there, if there's any questions on that one?
Just checking. Doesn't look like we have any questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On receipt then, all in favor? Opposed?
Okay.
Carried, and we have the recommendation. Moved and seconded for the financial plan for function 362. I don't see any comments, so all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Item number 12, the Royston Garbage Collection Service, function 366 for receipt. Moved and second, and over to staff.
Thank you. Through the chair. So this is the Royston Garbage Collection Service that's provided through under contract to Ontario, and that includes garbage and bi-weekly recycling. Revenues are generated from user fees and Recycle BC incentives. So for January 1st, the user rate will be $115.80 per household, and there'll be an increase on June 2nd. The increase is a result of there's annual increases in the contract. And so that will, and then you'll see some minor increases over the next few years based on both anticipated contract increases and tipping fee increases at the landfill. So the operating budget is proposed to be $186,000 this year, and that includes the contract services and the tipping fee paid for the landfill disposal fees. So in the spring of 2022, municipal partners will be issuing a consolidated request for proposal for automated curbside collection, which includes provision for the inclusion of our Royston service if we choose to join. So we'll be reviewing that this coming summer. And then the other aspect of that would be, once that's concluded, we may look at and see if there's a yard waste option for Royston if residents are interested in that increased cost to add that service to do that as well. Following that, there'll be the reserve contributions that we're going to maintain a balance of 50,000. Currently, there's 69,000 in the budget or in the reserves, and we're looking at increasing that amount into the reserves over the next 5 years. Because if we were to go to the automated totes, then that would offset the cost of purchasing the totes. So that would be the rationale for that over the next few years. And with following that, is there any questions?
It's Jesse. I see Director Arbor.
Yeah. So $140 per home per year. Is that right?
Yes. No, 125 this year.
Yeah, moving to 140.
Yeah, moving to 140. Yes, correct.
Amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's too bad what happened with the garbage collection and recycling AEP, and
yeah,
I think Roystoners are pretty well served with what they're getting. I was approached by residents of a single street that is right next door to the Kilmarnock Craigdarroch area. And if we wanted to add, if they wanted to do a small petition process for like 25 homes or 30 homes, is that something that I should put them in touch with you? Or is the service still open to expandability, or in the context of the bigger regional discussions, we need to think about things?
No, adjacent properties like that can be included. We've done that over the last few years. I'm not sure if that's the same resident, but has contacted us, so we're working with them right now to see what engage in that interest to go through that process.
Is that the Spence Road?
I don't have it in front of me, but it potentially.
Okay.
I think it accesses into Fanny Bay. Is that the one?
Not in Fanny Bay, no.
Oh no,
I'll get you the information, but basically,
okay,
yes,
sure,
we can still look to petition, and I think we did discuss that.
Yep. We did that. Kilmarnock was that. We added Kilmarnock on that last part, and there was another Minto Road a few years ago. We've included.
That sounds good. And
it's a simple process. Recycle BC doesn't. You have a certain percentage within the agreement that you can include additional properties under the same service.
And if all of Union Bay wanted to do 50%, it's adjacent to the service. But we did have a report on that last summer. I think that we looked at. But I mean, the requests are not going away on my side. So I guess I'll just refer them back to staff. And if we want to support a process, it sounds like that's fair game.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Green?
Yes, it's obvious to me that this whole idea of a consolidated roadside recycling and garbage pickup was nothing but a tax grab by the regional district. We could have made tens of dollars on it. But seriously, 140, what was it, 144? Was it?
Yeah.
There you are. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm paying over that every 3 months for pickup out at Rennie Road.
Of only garbage.
With absolutely no recycling. And that is one pickup a month of up to 5 cans, out of which I probably contribute 3/4 of 1 can. So, and I'm not the only one. I've been getting a lot of flack about this thing not going forward, because I mean, the majority of the people would benefit. We find out that the majority of the people that were opposed under to the fact that there wasn't any choice in it. And we've been down this road, and I know it's actually not something we want to go down today, but eventually, how do we get the message out there that this would be a huge saving for the majority of the population? And albeit being an actual utility service, it should be by rights, probably based on usage. And I know that Cowichan Valley, they actually weigh every can, don't they? They actually have a code on every can, and you pay for what you actually put through. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of that. But
yeah.
I'm curious about that. I'm going to follow up. Yeah.
And I know they actually have a camera that takes a picture of your garbage, and if you have too much recycling in it, you get a note.
I'm aware of that with the automated totes. The
automated system, yeah.
They can look into that.
Yeah, but you know, eventually we have to come up with something that is undeniably a better deal for the people, and we can reach our recycling goals that we need to get to. So nobody's harping on about it, because even my own neighbor thought it was just going to be a tax grab. And as soon as we got it, we're going to push up all the prices. I told them, what's the difference? It's a contract, a 5-year contract. You don't change it. But anyway, that is what it is, and we're saddled with it. So too bad, so sad.
Yeah.
We lose.
Yeah. Our contracts have just been escalation costs. Actually, Mterra's been really good. I mean, they're minor, and they've been running that now for Royston for I think 2014, and it's been very modest increases over that time.
Thanks to the directors, and in case we actually have, because You know, I think our community really missed out with not having that AAP move forward. My own question though to staff would be if an area that is not close to Union Bay wanted to join a service, you know, by petition, what would be the process?
I think I can try that, but I saw Mark put his microphone forward too. I think that anytime there's a interest from the public in looking at one of the services, in this case, one that's adjacent to Royston, we'd have to take a look at just the viability of that. And as Jesse says, take a look at the existing contract and what the added number of pickups would be. If the properties are not adjacent to the service, then it gets a little bit more complex because the contract is not so easy to be simply expanded by a number of homes. And so we would have to take a look at that viability as well. Mark, did you want to add anything to that? I know you've been living closer to this one.
Yeah, thank you, James. Through the chair, not too much to add. I think in the staff report that we brought forward on the the garbage collection service and the AAP results, we discussed potential options for moving forward, and the petition process was one of those options. And I think like James said, where it makes sense and where it's pretty much contiguous with an existing service, it should be considered, but otherwise should probably be discouraged unless it was a very large area that wanted to come in, but not just a small neighborhood remote from an existing service. And then just to provide a little bit of encouragement to the EASC, I think you did pass recommendations that this would continue to be pursued as part of a solid waste management plan update, where there'd be a really thorough process with engagement with the community to investigate further.
Great, thank you. End of rants.
I
don't see
like
anyone.
One
Oh,
thing.
go ahead. Please.
Sorry. Yeah. So with Recycle BC to qualify for that, which offsets the operating cost for Royston, they've increased their threshold to new services, and I don't know off the top of my head, but that has to be considered as well too, because there's like a wait list for curbside. So if we're I don't know, just like one electoral area, I think it's 5,000 houses now. So like Royston could expand to a certain percentage, but if it were to be a standalone electoral area, that would have to be looked at to offset the costs there. So.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So 5,000 homes pretty much.
I think I can confirm the number, but I just know that a standalone system for Recycle BC would be a wait list potentially, and then you'd have to, there's a minimum home small amount. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Did we vote on receipt? Okay, on receipt then, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried, and we have the recommendation. Moved and seconded to approve the financial plan for function 366. Anyone all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried unanimously. We do have a motion to move in camera under 91E of the community charter. Moved and second. And any comments? All right. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We will move in camera.
Clear the chambers.